I am Clara, 33 years old, and I have spent my entire life as the invisible bankroll for a family that despises me. On my birthday, my teenage niece tossed a glass of red wine across my only nice white suit and sneered that I finally looked as cheap as I actually was. My mother did not scold her. Instead, she took her side and told me to stop ruining the mood. I just smiled, paid for my tap water, and walked out. That very night, I canceled my sister's credit cards. By the next morning, her daughter woke up to find her luxury car completely gone. But that was just the beginning of how I dismantled their fake empire brick by brick. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family member who severely underestimated your true worth. The dark red Cabernet spilled down the lapel of my white silk blazer, bleeding into the delicate fabric like a fresh wound. The cold liquid seeped right through to my skin, instantly ruining the one nice outfit I had bought specifically to celebrate my birthday. I stood frozen at the edge of the mahogany table in the center of Prime Cut, one of the most exclusive and expensive steakhouses in downtown Chicago. The ambient chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull, distant ringing in my ears. Standing directly across from me was my 17-year-old niece, Brittany. She held the empty wine glass loosely between her manicured fingers, a picture-perfect smirk plastered across her face. "Now you look as cheap as you really are, Aunt Clara," Brittany sneered. Her voice carried just enough volume for the neighboring tables to turn their heads and stare at us. She flipped her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder and rolled her eyes in an exaggerated display of teenage contempt. "Seriously, White Silk. You do not even have the lifestyle to pull that off. You look like a waitress trying to blend in with the actual paying customers." I did not yell. I did not gasp. I slowly wiped a droplet of wine from my collarbone. I looked to my left, waiting for the reprimand. I waited for her mother, my older sister Stephanie, to intervene and be a parent. I wanted Stephanie to tell her daughter to apologize for such a blatant display of disrespect. Instead, Stephanie threw her head back and let out a sharp melodic laugh that cut right through my chest. She adjusted the diamond tennis bracelet around her wrist, a brilliant piece of jewelry I knew for a fact cost $10,000, and took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Oh, lighten up, Clara," Stephanie said, waving her hand dismissively at my ruined shirt. "Brittany just slipped. It was an accident. Besides, it is a blessing in disguise. That blazer was doing you absolutely no favors anyway. It was washing you out entirely and making you look completely exhausted. Next time, try shopping at a real boutique instead of whatever discount rack you pulled that from." I swallowed the tight, painful lump forming in my throat and looked at my mother, Beatrice. Surely my own mother would say something to defend me. It was my birthday dinner after all. I had paid for the ride here myself. I had sat in total silence for 45 minutes while they completely ignored me to talk about their upcoming ski trip to Aspen. Beatrice sighed heavily, adjusting her expensive cashmere shawl around her shoulders. She looked at my wine-stained blazer with overt disgust, as if my mere presence was an insult to her sophisticated aesthetic. "Do not make a scene, Clara," my mother scolded, her tone icy and sharply reprimanding. "Brittany said she slipped, so she slipped. Do not embarrass us in front of Terrence and the rest of the restaurant. Just go to the restroom, run some water over it, and sit back down quietly so we can finish our meal. You know how sensitive Brittany is to negative energy." Terrence, my brother-in-law, chuckled loudly from the head of the table. He is a 36-year-old African-American man who always dresses in bespoke three-piece suits, carrying himself like the chief executive of a massive corporate conglomerate. In reality, Terrence was a serial entrepreneur whose entire business portfolio consisted of flashy pitch decks and absolutely zero actual revenue. "It is all about mindset," Clara Terrence said, leaning back comfortably in his leather chair and swirling his expensive scotch. He pointed a finger at me as if delivering a motivational keynote speech. "You are projecting a scarcity mindset. You are letting a little spill ruin your synergistic alignment. Successful people do not sweat the small stuff. They pivot. Just pivot to the bathroom, clean up the mess, and let us get back to celebrating my new real estate acquisition." his acquisition. At my birthday dinner, I looked at the four of them sitting there so proudly. My sister draped head to toe in designer labels, my brother-in-law playing the role of a billionaire mogul, my niece acting like reality television royalty, my mother entirely complicit in their cruelty, worshipping the ground they walked on simply because they projected the flawless illusion of immense wealth. They honestly thought I was just a boring, low-level accountant, a simple number cruncher who sat in a gray cubicle all day long. They thought I wore plain clothes because I was broke and struggling to get by. They had absolutely no idea that I was a senior forensic accountant and the majority shareholder of a massive private wealth management firm. I pulled a $20 bill from my bag, tossed it onto the pristine tablecloth to cover my tap water, and walked out without looking back. The chilly Chicago night air hit my face as I pushed through the glass doors of Prime Cut. I pulled my coat tight over my ruined silk blazer, hiding the wine stain from pedestrians on the sidewalk. I signaled for an Uber, my movements precise and unhurried. For the first time in 33 years, my heart was not racing with anxiety or aching with familial rejection. Instead, a profound glacial calm washed over my body. The ride back to my apartment was silent. The vibrant city lights blurred against the tinted window of the car, matching the rapid shift in my own internal perspective. The damp, cold wine clinging to my skin was a physical reminder of the utter disrespect I had endured for my entire life. For over 3 decades, I had blindly accepted my role as the scapegoat. I was the invisible sister. Stephanie was the beautiful, charismatic golden child who married a supposed visionary. Beatrice and William, my parents, worshipped the ground Stephanie walked on. When Terrence came into the picture with his loud promises of generational wealth and Silicon Valley hustle, my parents practically handed him the keys to their kingdom. They believed his every word, blinded by the flashy suits and confident corporate jargon. They completely ignored the reality of his constant, undeniable failures. When Terrence bankrupted my parents 5 years ago with a botched commercial real estate scam, they did not blame him. They blamed the unpredictable market. They were weeks away from foreclosure, weeks away from losing their precious status at the local country club. I stepped in anonymously to save them from ruin. Through a proxy attorney, I purchased their mounting debt, bought the house outright, and set up a forgiveness trust that allowed them to live there for $1 a month while providing a generous monthly cash stipend. I did it because they were my parents. I did it because I believed incredibly naively that family protects family. But tonight, looking down at my ruined blazer, the illusion finally shattered into a million pieces. They did not love me. They loved the money they thought they were entitled to. And the arrogant teenager who just humiliated me in public was driving a brand new sports car that was directly linked to my corporate lease account. The Uber pulled up to a sleek, high-rise building in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. I stepped into the private elevator and scanned my fingerprint, riding straight up to my luxury penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a sprawling, modern space my family had never seen because I had always hosted them in a modest, rented studio across town just to avoid their intrusive questions and snide remarks. I walked inside, shrugging off my winter coat. I took off the ruined white blazer and threw it directly into the stainless steel kitchen trash can. I did not bother trying to treat the stain or salvage the fabric. The era of trying to salvage things that were irreparably damaged was officially over. I walked down the long hallway into my home office, a room equipped with a multi-monitor workstation that rivaled any corporate command center. The bright screens illuminated my face in the dark room as I booted up the operating system. I bypassed the standard security protocols and logged into the highly secured portal of my private wealth management firm. I pulled up the primary ledger for the Blackwood Family Trust, the dummy corporation I had set up exclusively to manage their expenses. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up the financial lifelines I had generously maintained for years. I clicked on the sub-account designated for Stephanie and Terrence. The screen displayed their current balance at $45,000 out of a $50,000 monthly limit. They had been burning through cash at an astonishing rate. I moved my cursor to the status toggle. With one single deliberate click, I switched the account from active to frozen. Just like that, their primary source of liquid cash evaporated into thin air. Next, I pulled up the American Express Platinum cards I had issued to Stephanie, Terrence, and Beatrice under the corporate umbrella. I scrolled through the recent charges with a sense of clinical detachment. $1,200 at Saks Fifth Avenue, $400 at a luxury nail salon, $3,000 for a winter resort deposit in Aspen. They were funding their extravagant illusions on my dime while treating me like dirt on their shoes. I highlighted all 3 card numbers on my screen. I selected the action to report them as stolen and cancel them immediately. The system confirmed the cancellation within seconds. Their purchasing power was officially dead. Finally, I pulled up the corporate automotive leases. There it was, shining clearly on the screen. The new BMW assigned to Brittany. Technically, the car was owned by my firm, leased for a staggering $1,400 a month. Brittany paraded that vehicle around as proof of her parents' success. I opened the vendor portal for the repossession agency we kept on retainer for defaulting corporate clients. I typed in the address of Terrence and Stephanie's suburban mansion. Under the priority tab, I selected urgent. I typed a specific instruction to recover the asset immediately and explicitly noted not to notify the driver beforehand. I hit send and watched the confirmation receipt pop into my inbox. I closed the laptop, letting the dual screens fade to black in the quiet room. I walked into my immaculate modern kitchen and poured myself a tall glass of refreshing ice-cold water. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sleeping city skyline, reflecting on the dark lake. I searched my heart for any lingering hint of familial remorse. I found absolutely none inside me. By tomorrow morning, their entire carefully constructed world would completely shatter into pieces. At exactly 7:30 the next morning, my phone started vibrating aggressively against the nightstand. I did not rush to answer it. I lay in my warm bed, staring up at the high ceiling, simply listening to the relentless buzzing. It stopped for a brief moment, then immediately started ringing again. I rolled over, picked up the device, and looked at the bright screen. I had 14 missed calls from Stephanie and 20 frantic texts. I opened my voicemail. The first message was from Brittany. I pressed play, bracing for her screeching. "Aunt Clara, someone stole my car. I woke up to go to Starbucks and my car is completely gone. There is no broken glass. Dad is calling the police right now, but the dispatcher is saying it was repossessed. That is a total lie. Call me back right now and fix this." I smiled, deleted the message, and got out of bed. I walked into the kitchen. I made coffee, meticulously measuring beans while listening to my phone dance on the marble counter. The panic on their end was palpable, radiating through the cellular network. For years, I had jumped at every demand they made, terrified of displeasing them. Today, their emergency was just background noise to my peaceful morning routine. By 8:15, a furious, heavy pounding echoed from my front door. It was the frantic, entitled banging of people who believed the world existed solely to serve them. I tightened the belt of my silk robe, walked across the pristine hardwood floor, and calmly unlocked the deadbolt. I swung the door open to find Stephanie and Terrence standing in the hallway, both of them vibrating with pure, unadulterated rage. "What in the world is going on?" Stephanie screamed, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. She was wearing designer yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, but her face was flushed red with anger and humiliation. Brittany had her car towed away. The police officer on the phone said the title holder issued a repossession order. "You set up that lease, Clara. Fix it right now." Terrence stepped in right behind her. He tried his best to maintain his usual alpha male composure, puffing out his chest and standing tall, but the sweat beading on his forehead betrayed his internal panic. "Listen to me, Clara. We have a serious liquidity issue this morning. My primary card was declined at the country club breakfast meeting. Stephanie had her card declined at the luxury spa. I need you to call the trust administrator immediately. We are in the middle of a massive synergistic pivot for my new real estate fund, and I absolutely cannot have my cash flow interrupted by your clerical errors. I closed the front door softly. I turned around and took a slow sip of my coffee, leaning casually against the kitchen island. I looked at the two of them. They were completely stripped of their restaurant bravado from the night before, panicking over declined plastic cards and leased metal. They were so consumed by their financial emergencies that they did not even pause to look around. They did not notice the custom Italian furniture, the original contemporary artwork hanging on the walls, or the sweeping skyline views of Chicago. They were standing in a multi-million-dollar penthouse, but their minds were entirely focused on demanding I fix their problems. "There is no clerical error, Terrence," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly composed. Stephanie ripped her oversized sunglasses off her face and glared at me. "Then what is it? Did you miss a payment on the lease? Are you truly that incompetent? You are an accountant, Clara. Do your job and call the bank to sort this mess out before I call Mom and tell her how badly you are messing up the family finances." "You are welcome to call Mom," I replied, taking another sip of my coffee. I suspect her card started declining about an hour ago as well. She is probably dealing with her own embarrassing situation at the country club right this second. Terrence stepped forward, placing his hands flat on my kitchen counter, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. "This is not a game, Clara. You do not understand the high-level maneuvers I am executing right now. I have investors waiting on capital deployment. If you locked us out of the portal by accident, you need to fix it before you cause irreparable damage to my corporate standing. I need that trust money flowing by noon, or I will hold you personally responsible for the lost revenue." I set my coffee mug down on the counter. The ceramic clink echoed sharply in the large open room. I looked at Terrence, noticing the slight tremor in his hands. He was desperate. He needed that money to keep up his charade, to keep playing the successful businessman in front of his wealthy peers. Stephanie stood beside him, tapping her foot impatiently, still oblivious to the massive shift in power that had just occurred. I reached into the deep drawer behind me and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. I tossed it onto the kitchen counter between us. It landed with a loud, satisfying thud that made Stephanie flinch. "I did my job, Stephanie," I said, locking my eyes directly onto hers. "I audited the accounts. I reviewed the reckless spending. And I decided that I am no longer funding the lavish lifestyle of people who treat me like garbage." Terrence scoffed loudly, shaking his head in disbelief. "You, funding us? Do not make me laugh, Clara. That money comes directly from the family trust. You are just the low-level paper pusher who manages the online portal. You have absolutely no authority over those funds." "Are you entirely sure about that, Terrence?" I asked softly. I watched as Stephanie shifted her gaze from the thick folder to my calm face, a flicker of genuine confusion finally breaking through her entitled rage. For the first time since they had barged into my home, she seemed to register her surroundings. She noticed the expensive espresso machine, the imported marble countertops, the sheer scale of the penthouse that I supposedly could never afford on my meager salary. Her brow furrowed as her brain struggled to reconcile the pathetic sister she loved to mock with the wealthy woman standing before her now. Terrence remained stubbornly blind, waiting for me to apologize and fix his financial crisis, completely unaware that the trap had been sprung and they were standing right in the middle of it. I reached out and flipped the heavy cover of the manila folder open. The sharp rustle of the thick paper seemed to echo loudly against the high ceilings of my penthouse. I carefully extracted the first stack of stapled documents and slid it smoothly across the polished marble island until it bumped gently against Terrence's hand. "Read the header at the top of that page, Terrence," I commanded, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "Read it out loud for both of us to hear." Terrence scoffed, rolling his eyes as if humoring a stubborn child. He picked up the document, adjusting his posture to look down his nose at the text. His eyes scanned the bold black letters at the very top of the page. I watched with immense satisfaction as the arrogant smirk slowly melted off his face, replaced by a sudden rigid tension in his jaw. The healthy color began to rapidly drain from his cheeks, leaving behind an ashen, sickly gray hue that made him look 10 years older in a matter of seconds. "Read it, Terrence." I pushed, leaning slightly over the counter. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Blackwood Family Trust," he read, his voice losing all its previous booming resonance. "A subsidiary of Vanguard Forensic and Capital Limited Liability Company, sole proprietor Clara Williams." Stephanie immediately snatched the paper directly out of his trembling hands. Her eyes darted frantically back and forth across the legal jargon. "What is this garbage? What does this even mean? This has to be a fake document. You printed this off the internet." The family trust was set up by a private investor to help Dad recover after the massive commercial real estate crash 5 years ago. Dad told us the market took a bad turn, and a silent partner stepped in to save the estate. "I am the private investor, Stephanie," I said, allowing the absolute truth to drop like a heavy stone between us. "There is no magical family trust. There is no generational wealth waiting to be unlocked." 5 years ago, when Terrence brilliantly convinced Dad to put the entire family home up as collateral for his failed cryptocurrency mining startup, Dad went completely bankrupt. I was the one who bailed him out of that mess. I bought the crippling debt from the bank. I bought the house outright. And I gave you all a monthly allowance through a dummy corporation because I actually felt sorry for you. "That is a total lie," Stephanie shrieked, the pitch of her voice rising to a frantic squeal. "You do not have that kind of money. You never have. You are a low-level accountant who wears cheap clothes and takes Ubers. You cannot possibly own a wealth management firm. I am a senior forensic auditor and the majority shareholder of one of the most profitable private wealth management firms in the entire Midwest." I corrected her coldly, enjoying the look of pure shock contorting her features. "I trace hidden assets for billionaires. I destroy corporate fraudsters for a living. And speaking of corporate fraudsters, let us talk about your husband." I reached back into the folder and slid 3 more heavily highlighted documents across the marble counter toward Terrence. "Let us talk about your visionary synergistic pivots, Terrence. Let us take a good hard look at your actual hustle mindset." Terrence took a physical step backward, bumping into a sleek leather bar stool. He did not reach for the new papers. He knew exactly what they contained. "Here we have the financial filings for 3 separate limited liability companies registered in Delaware under your name." I continued, tapping the top sheet with my index finger. 36 months of operations. $0 in actual revenue. $400,000 in outstanding commercial loans from secondary lenders. You are not a venture capitalist. You are not a visionary entrepreneur building generational wealth. You are a professional grifter. And worse than that, you have been secretly using my corporate credit lines to pay off the minimum balances on your failing business loans just to keep yourself out of federal court. The air in the kitchen grew incredibly thick. Stephanie turned slowly to look at her husband. Her eyes were wide with a mix of horror and dawning realization. "Terrence, what is she talking about?" Stephanie demanded. "Tell her she is lying. Tell her our real estate fund is about to close that massive deal in Austin." Terrence opened his mouth, but he could not find the words. The alpha male facade he had meticulously maintained for a decade completely evaporated right in front of my eyes. His shoulders slumped, and he suddenly looked like a frightened, cornered animal. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading for a lifeline that I had no intention of throwing. "Clara, listen to me," Terrence stammered, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "You do not understand the current venture capital market right now. The commercial sector is incredibly volatile. I just need a temporary bridge loan. Give me 30 days. Just 30 days to secure the seed funding for my new property tech application, and I will pay back every single cent to the trust with premium interest. I swear to you, the deal is basically at the finish line." "There is no trust," I repeated, enunciating every single syllable with crystal clear precision so the reality would finally penetrate his thick skull. "The credit cards are permanently canceled. The luxury car your daughter was parading around in is gone. The free ride is over." Terrence wiped the sweat from his forehead, stepping closer to the counter, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Clara, you cannot do this. If those corporate cards bounce, my secondary creditors are going to call in the principal loans. They will take everything. I will lose the business facade. I will face audits. You are going to ruin me over a spilled glass of wine. I am doing this because you are a parasite, Terence, I replied, my voice completely devoid of sympathy. The spilled wine was just the final catalyst. You have spent years mocking my career, calling me a low-level paper pusher, while secretly draining the very funds I provided to keep a roof over your head. You enabled my sister and my niece to treat me like garbage because you thought my silence meant I was weak. My silence was simply observation. I was auditing your character and you failed miserably. Stephanie finally found her voice again, though it lacked its usual arrogant sting. She grabbed Terence by the arm, digging her manicured nails into his expensive suit jacket. "Are we broke?" she asked him, her voice trembling with genuine terror. "Terence, are we actually broke?" Terence could not meet her gaze. He stared down at the marble countertop, his silence confirming everything I had just exposed. "You are worse than broke, Stephanie," I clarified for her. "You are drowning in debt that you can no longer mask with my money. And if you ever let your spoiled, entitled daughter throw a drink on me again, I will personally call the Internal Revenue Service and hand over the comprehensive file I have compiled on your fraudulent tax returns. I will make sure Terence faces a federal investigation for wire fraud before the end of the fiscal quarter. Now both of you need to turn around and get out of my apartment before I have building security forcibly remove you." Stephanie and Terence did not say another word. They backed away from the kitchen island as if the imported marble countertop had suddenly caught fire. Terence grabbed his wife by the elbow, practically dragging her toward the foyer. Stephanie stumbled in her designer sneakers, her face a mask of absolute terror and disbelief. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind them, sealing the silence back into my penthouse. I stood alone in my kitchen for a long moment. I picked up my coffee mug and took a slow, deliberate sip. The dark roast tasted exceptionally good this morning. The air in my apartment felt infinitely lighter, cleared of the toxic energy they carried with them wherever they went. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the bustling Chicago streets below. For my entire adult life, I had contorted myself into a small, insignificant box to keep the peace. I had paid their debts, swallowed their insults, and smiled through their public humiliations. I had convinced myself that keeping my family afloat, even anonymously, was the right thing to do. That box was officially crushed. Right on cue, my cell phone began to ring from the kitchen island. The screen lit up, flashing a contact photo of my mother, Beatrice. She was smiling brightly in the picture, wearing a pearl necklace and a cashmere sweater, standing in front of the sweeping staircase of the family estate. The estate she firmly believed she owned. I let the phone ring 4 times. I walked over, picked it up, and hit accept. I did not even get the chance to say hello. "Clara Marie Williams. What in the name of God is wrong with you?" Beatrice shrieked through the speaker. Her voice was shrill enough to make me pull the device a few inches away from my ear. "I am standing at the front desk of the Oak Brook Country Club, and the manager just informed me that my platinum card was declined in front of the entire charity committee. Stephanie just called me crying hysterically, saying you somehow stole Brittany's car and froze her accounts. Fix this immediately." "I did not steal anything, Mom," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I simply stopped paying for it. The lease for the car was in my corporate name. The credit cards were issued under my business account. I am revoking your privileges." "I do not care whose name is on the administrative paperwork," she yelled, the panic and embarrassment elevating her pitch. "That trust fund belongs to this family. Your father is having palpitations in the dining room right now. You are going to log into whatever computer system you manage, turn my cards back on, and personally apologize to your sister. If you do not fix this right this very second, I will ensure you are written out of the will completely. You will not see a single dime of our estate." I let out a genuine, breathless laugh. The sheer audacity of her threat was almost comical. It was the exact same threat she had used to control me since I was a teenager. "Obey us or lose your inheritance. Conform to our expectations or be cut off from the family wealth." They wielded their money like a weapon, completely oblivious to the fact that their arsenal had been empty for half a decade. "Cut me out of the will," I asked, leaning against the counter. "Mom, what will?" "The bank accounts that have been severely overdrawn for 5 years. The retirement investments Terrence liquidated and lost in his failed real estate ventures. The house," she screamed, her voice echoing sharply over the line. "The family estate is worth millions of dollars. Your father and I have built a legacy. You will get absolutely nothing. We will leave it all to Stephanie and the grandchildren." "Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a dead clinical tone, "you do not own the house." Dead silence fell over the line. The ambient background noise of the country club vanished. I could hear her sharp, ragged breathing. "What are you talking about?" she finally whispered, the fierce anger replaced by a sudden creeping dread. "Of course we own the house. It has been in our name for 20 years. 5 years ago, you defaulted on the primary mortgage because Terrence convinced Dad to leverage the property for a business loan," I explained, feeling a strange mix of pity and profound disgust. "The bank was exactly 30 days away from auctioning it off to the highest bidder. A private firm swooped in, bought the crushing debt, and offered you a reverse lease agreement where you pay $1 a month to stay." "Yes, the investment group," she said, defensively, clinging desperately to her fabricated reality. "Your father's brilliant connections saved us from that temporary setback." "I am the investment group," I stated, clearly refusing to let her hide behind her delusions any longer. "I own the deed, Mom. I hold the absolute title to that property. You and Dad are my tenants, and right now you are threatening to cut your landlord out of a will that contains absolutely zero assets." "You are lying," she gasped. I could hear the sheer terror vibrating in her chest. "You are a wicked, jealous girl making up vicious lies because you have always hated Stephanie. You have always been jealous of her beautiful family and her successful husband. Believe whatever helps you sleep at night," I said. "But the free ride is permanently over. I am no longer funding the illusion of your wealth. If you want to keep living in that house, you will start paying market rent on the first day of next month. That is $8,000 a month, Beatrice. Have a nice day at the country club." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. I set the device face down on the marble counter and took a deep, cleansing breath. The silence in my penthouse felt victorious. I knew this would not be the end of it. Stephanie and Terrence were parasites, and parasites do not let go of their primary host without trying to draw blood. They would retaliate. They would try to destroy me using whatever desperate tactics they could muster to regain their power. I walked back into my home office and opened my laptop. I pulled up my corporate email and opened a new draft. I typed in the address for the head of building security at my firm's downtown headquarters. Subject line: Security alert regarding Stephanie Blackwood. Message: If an individual by the name of Stephanie Blackwood approaches the lobby today, do not let her pass the security turnstiles under any circumstances. If she causes a disturbance, escort her off the premises immediately and contact local authorities. I hit send, closed the laptop, and walked into my expansive walk-in closet. I dressed in a sharp, tailored charcoal suit, strapped my luxury watch to my wrist, and headed down to the waiting corporate car. I knew exactly what Stephanie would do next. She would try to attack the one thing she thought I valued more than my family, my modest, boring accounting job. She had absolutely no idea she was about to walk straight into a lion's den. The morning commute to the financial district gave me plenty of time to mentally prepare for the inevitable fallout. My driver navigated the sleek black town car through the busy Chicago traffic, eventually pulling up to the towering glass and steel skyscraper that housed Vanguard Forensic and Capital Limited Liability Company. I stepped out onto the pristine sidewalk, breathing in the crisp air. For years, I had deliberately downplayed my career to my family. I let them believe I occupied a drab, windowless cubicle crunching numbers for a mid-level accounting firm. I allowed their condescension to wash over me because explaining the reality of my job would have only triggered their insatiable greed. Vanguard was not a standard accounting firm. We handled crisis management, asset recovery, and forensic audits for the top 1%. The architecture of our headquarters reflected that elite status. The lobby featured imported Italian marble towering water features and a security system that rivaled a federal building. I swiped my keycard at the private executive elevator and rode it to the top floor. My corner office offered a panoramic view of the city, a stark contrast to the miserable, lonely existence my mother and sister loved to project onto me. I hung my coat in the closet, booted up my workstation, and began reviewing a complex corporate fraud case we were preparing for federal court. Despite the high stakes of my actual job, my mind remained acutely focused on the security alert I had issued earlier. I knew Stephanie. She possessed a unique brand of arrogant entitlement that made her entirely unpredictable when cornered. Stripped of her unlimited credit cards and her daughter's luxury vehicle, she would not just sit at home and pout. She would seek immediate vengeance. She would try to strike at the one thing she believed I valued above all else, which was my boring, safe corporate job. At exactly 11 o'clock, the flashing light on my desk console caught my attention. It was a direct internal call from David, my senior branch manager. David was a brilliant, no-nonsense executive who handled the day-to-day public-facing operations of the firm. He was the buffer between my high-level forensic team and the general public. I picked up the receiver. "Go ahead, David," I said, keeping my tone perfectly professional. "Clara, we have a rapidly escalating situation down in the main reception area." David reported, his usually calm voice laced with evident confusion and slight alarm. "There is a woman causing a massive disturbance. She somehow bypassed the main security desk by tailgating a courier through the electronic turnstiles. She is currently standing at the front desk, screaming at the receptionist, demanding to speak to whoever is in charge of your department." I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Is she wearing oversized designer sunglasses indoors and carrying a counterfeit Hermes bag?" I asked. David paused for a second. "Yes, exactly. She is refusing to leave until she speaks with your direct supervisor. She is making some extremely severe allegations, Clara. She is telling everyone in the lobby that you are a corporate thief, that you have severe mental health issues, and that you have been actively stealing money from your family's private bank accounts. Do you want me to call the police and have her removed for trespassing?" I stood up and walked over to the glass wall of my office, which overlooked the expansive central atrium of our floor. "No, David," I replied smoothly. "Do not call the police just yet. I want to hear exactly what she has to say. Go down there and introduce yourself as the branch manager. Let her vent. Then escort her up to conference room B. I want to handle this situation personally." "Are you completely sure about this, Clara?" David asked, clearly hesitant to bring an unhinged individual further into our secure facility. "She seems incredibly volatile. She is threatening to call the local news stations if we do not terminate your employment today." "I am positive, David. Just play along for a few minutes. Make her feel heard." I ended the call and pulled up the live security feed from the lobby on my secondary monitor. The high-definition camera provided a perfect view of the reception desk. Stephanie was pacing furiously back and forth across the marble floor. She was gesturing wildly, her face flushed with righteous indignation. Several high-net-worth clients waiting in the lounge area were staring at her in sheer disbelief. Stephanie was completely oblivious to her surroundings, entirely consumed by her mission to destroy my livelihood. I watched as David stepped out of the private elevator bank and approached the reception desk. He smoothed his tailored suit jacket and extended his hand toward my sister. I could not hear the audio, but I could easily read the situation through their body language. David introduced himself, projecting his usual calm, authoritative demeanor. Stephanie immediately latched onto him. She pointed a manicured finger aggressively in his face, launching into her prepared tirade. I imagined the absolute venom pouring from her mouth. She would be spinning a wild, dramatic tale about her poor, victimized family. She would frame herself as the concerned, loving sister who had rushed down here to save the firm from a rogue criminal employee. She would claim that I was a bitter, lonely spinster who was using company software to hack into her husband's highly successful real estate accounts out of pure jealousy. I watched David nod politely, maintaining his professional composure while Stephanie ranted. She threw her hands in the air, clearly demanding my immediate termination. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted security guards to drag me out of the building carrying a cardboard box full of desk supplies. She wanted me to feel the exact same sheer panic and powerlessness that she had felt when her platinum card was declined at the luxury spa that morning. Stephanie believed she was executing a masterful power play. She truly thought she could waltz into a commercial building, throw a tantrum, and easily destroy the career of an expendable low-level accountant. She was so blinded by her own narcissism and her desperate need for revenge that she never once stopped to look at the name of the company on the wall. She never bothered to research the corporate hierarchy. She was entirely confident that her loud, aggressive tactics would force a middle manager like David to immediately capitulate to her demands to avoid a public scandal. On the screen, David gestured toward the secure elevator bank. He was inviting her upstairs just as I had instructed. Stephanie lifted her chin, puffing out her chest with a victorious swagger. She adjusted her designer jacket and marched toward the elevator, looking like a conquering general who had just won a major war. She thought she was heading upstairs to witness my final, humiliating termination. I turned away from the security monitor and walked toward the door of my office. I straightened my suit, took a deep breath, and headed down the glass-paneled corridor toward Conference Room B. I was going to give my sister exactly what she asked for: a face-to-face meeting with the person in charge. I stepped into Conference Room B. The space was dominated by a massive polished table. Stephanie was pacing frantically at the far end. She clutched her counterfeit bag, oversized sunglasses pushed atop her highlighted hair. David stood near the screen, holding a folder, maintaining perfect professional neutrality. Stephanie stopped pacing. A triumphant sneer stretched across her face. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my chest. "There she is," Stephanie spat. "I hope you brought human resources with you. You need to terminate this woman immediately. She is completely unstable. She has been illegally hacking into our private family bank accounts. She committed severe wire fraud this morning and stole a luxury vehicle from a teenager." David looked from Stephanie to me, maintaining his immaculate composure. "Ma'am, I think there is a significant misunderstanding regarding the situation here today." "There is absolutely no misunderstanding," Stephanie screamed, slamming her hand against the table. "Do not try to protect her just because she works for you. She is a corporate criminal utilizing your firm to terrorize her own flesh and blood. I want her terminated right this second, and I want your security team to escort her out of this building before I call the police. I will drag this entire firm into a massive public scandal if you do not fire her today." I calmly walked to the head of the table. I sat down in a leather executive chair and crossed my legs. I rested my hands on the wood and looked up at my sister. I let the silence stretch out, allowing her furious breathing to become the only sound in the room. She truly believed she had successfully destroyed my life. "Are you quite finished, Stephanie?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "No, I am not even close to finished," she yelled. "Do you really think you can play God with our lives just because you push papers in a cubicle? You are absolutely nothing, Clara. You are a lonely, bitter woman who is insanely jealous of my successful husband, my beautiful daughter, and the perfect life I have built. You are going to pack your cheap little desk into a cardboard box today." I turned my head slowly toward David. "David, could you please clarify the organizational structure of this institution for my sister?" David cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. He looked at Stephanie with a devastating mixture of profound pity and professional disdain. "Ma'am, Clara is not a paper pusher. Clara Williams is the founder, majority shareholder, and managing director of Vanguard Forensic and Capital Limited Liability Company. I am merely the branch manager. She is my boss. She owns this entire firm." Stephanie froze. The furious red flush on her cheeks instantly drained away, leaving her looking hollow and suddenly very small. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The counterfeit bag slipped slightly in her grip. She stared at David, waiting for the punchline of a joke that did not exist. "That is impossible," she finally stammered. "She is just a regular tax accountant. Mom told us she barely makes $50,000 a year. She lives in a tiny rented apartment. Mom only knows exactly what I allowed her to know." I interrupted, standing up. I kept my life hidden because I knew that if you or Terrence ever found out I had actual wealth, you would try to bleed me dry even faster than you already were. You came into my building, Stephanie. You screamed at my receptionists. You tried to get me fired from the company I built from the ground up. Stephanie took a step backward, her eyes darting frantically around the room, finally registering the immense wealth and power embedded in the architecture of the building. She was trapped. David, please hand me the legal file I requested. David stepped forward and slid the sleek folder across the table. I pulled out a notarized legal document. This is a formal cease and desist order, I said, sliding the document across the table until it stopped an inch from her hands. It legally mandates that you, Terrence, and Brittany refrain from contacting me, harassing me, or making defamatory statements about me or my business entities. If you breach this order, my legal team will file a massive lawsuit for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We will take every single thing you have left. Stephanie stared at the paper as if it were radioactive. You are doing all of this over a spilled glass of wine, she whispered, her voice cracking with genuine terror. I am doing this over a lifetime of blatant disrespect and abuse, I corrected her coldly. The wine was just the final catalyst. I am no longer your punching bag, and I am certainly no longer your personal ATM. Now take your fake handbag, walk out of my building, and never show your face here again. David, please have our security team escort her to the street. As two security guards appeared at the glass doors, Stephanie's bravado completely collapsed. She grabbed the cease and desist order with shaking fingers, turned around, and practically fled the room. Her heels clicked frantically against the floor as the guards marched her toward the elevator. I watched her retreating figure through the glass walls, feeling an immense sense of sheer vindication. However, I knew the battle was far from over. While Stephanie had miserably failed to attack me in the corporate world, her entitled daughter Brittany was currently taking the war to the digital front. Later that afternoon, my phone began pinging incessantly with rapid-fire notifications. An anonymous tracking account I used to monitor online activity was blowing up. Brittany had just gone live on social media, ready to spin a web of malicious lies. I sat back at my heavy desk and prepared for the next phase of their destruction. I picked up my smartphone and tapped the social media icon. The screen immediately refreshed, pulling up the live feed of my 17-year-old niece. Brittany was sitting on the edge of her plush, oversized bed, framed by the expensive lighting equipment I had unknowingly paid for. She was wearing a designer hoodie that cost more than most people made in a week. Her blonde hair was perfectly messy, and thick streams of dark mascara ran down her cheeks. It was a masterclass in performative crying. The viewer count at the top of the screen was climbing rapidly. Hey guys! Brittany sobbed directly into the camera lens, her voice trembling with practiced, highly manipulative vulnerability as she stared deeply at her audience. I normally do not share personal family drama on here, but I am just so completely heartbroken and terrified right now. My aunt, who has always been incredibly jealous of me and my mom, literally stole my car last night. She hacked into our private bank accounts and took my vehicle because she is bitter that she is single and miserable. I work so hard for my brand and my followers, and she is trying to destroy me out of pure spite. She wiped a tear away, making sure her manicured nails were clearly visible to the camera. We do not even know how we are going to buy groceries this week. She froze all our money. She is a toxic, abusive monster. The live comments section was scrolling so incredibly fast, it was just a continuous blur of angry text. Her loyal followers were eating up every single word of her fabricated tragedy. They were validating her lies, feeding her massive ego, and turning her into a digital martyr. The video ended, but the damage was already spreading like a wildfire across the internet. Within a mere 45 minutes, the video had crossed 500,000 views. The algorithm grabbed hold of the sensational family drama and pushed it to the main discovery pages. Brittany uploaded a highly edited follow-up video sharing my full name and a link to my personal social media profiles. She did not know about my wealth management firm, so she directed her massive mob to the small, inactive accounts I used to keep up appearances. The internet mob is a terrifying force when unleashed. Thousands of strangers who knew absolutely nothing about my life or the decades of emotional abuse I had suffered suddenly appointed themselves as my judge, jury, and executioners. My phone began to overheat from the sheer volume of incoming notifications. The digital onslaught was relentless and incredibly vicious. My inbox flooded with hundreds of hateful messages. I scrolled through the endless stream of vitriol with a detached clinical eye. "You are a disgusting, bitter old hag. Give your niece her car back, you thief. You are going to pay for ruining her life." Some messages quickly crossed the line from angry insults to explicit violent threats. Anonymous users sent graphic descriptions of what they wanted to do to me. One direct message detailed a fake daily routine, claiming they were waiting outside my apartment building to teach me a painful physical lesson. Another user posted the address of a local tax preparation firm where they mistakenly believed I worked, urging people to flood the business with fake negative reviews to get me immediately fired. The sheer magnitude of the digital attack would have driven most people to a complete mental breakdown. It was specifically designed to induce absolute panic and force a rapid, desperate surrender. Brittany wanted me to call her crying and begging for mercy, offering to return her luxury car and reinstate her unlimited credit cards if she would just take the viral videos down. She deeply wanted to prove to her highly manipulative parents that she had the absolute power to crush me and force me back into my previous role as the silent, obedient bankroll for their completely unearned, extravagant lifestyle. She truly thought she held all the winning cards in this digital warfare. She severely underestimated her target. I did not feel fear. I felt a cold, calculating focus wash over my entire mind. As a forensic expert, I spent my entire professional career dealing with high-stakes corporate extortion and relentless financial pressure. A massive, screaming horde of angry teenagers on the internet was absolutely nothing compared to the incredibly ruthless corporate billionaires I routinely dismantled in federal courtrooms. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, walked back into my home office, and sat down at my powerful workstation. I did not post a frantic rebuttal video. I did not attempt to defend myself in the chaotic comment sections. Engaging with an angry mob only feeds their self-righteous fury and validates their behavior. Instead, I opened a highly secure, untraceable server on my primary monitor. I began to meticulously compile a comprehensive digital dossier. Every action leaves a paper trail, and Brittany was about to learn a very painful lesson about corporate liability and brand management. Her entire online persona was built on the carefully crafted illusion of being an independent, wealthy, self-made teen entrepreneur. She constantly flaunted her fake luxury lifestyle to secure highly lucrative sponsorships with mid-tier fashion and major cosmetics brands. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it with her name. I started downloading her videos, taking screenshots of her defamatory claims, and compiling a massive list of every single corporate sponsor she had partnered with over the past 2 years. The internet mob wanted to play a ruthless game of public exposure and permanent financial ruin. I was more than happy to oblige them in their request. I was going to show my highly arrogant niece what actual, undeniable financial ruin truly looked like in the real world. I slowly cracked my knuckles, took a deep, calming breath, and began rapidly typing out the highly damaging emails. The first target on my list was an organic skincare brand that recently signed a contract with Brittany. I opened a message window through my encrypted, untraceable server. I kept the tone strictly professional, utilizing the precise corporate language I use daily in financial audits. I typed the subject line with calculated intention: fraudulent representation and liability notice regarding Brittany Blackwood. I attached the verified credit card statements showing that the luxury purchases she bragged about in sponsored videos were charged to a corporate account and subsequently canceled due to unauthorized use. I attached the official repossession order for the BMW complete, with the vehicle identification number and lease default notices. I highlighted the morality and authenticity clauses found in standard influencer contracts. Major brands spend millions cultivating public trust, and they despise being associated with financial fraud or fabricated wealth. My actions were completely legal. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and I was dealing strictly in verified financial facts. I repeated this exact process for her other major financial lifelines. I drafted a localized email for a prominent fast fashion retailer. I prepared a third dossier for an exclusive luxury hair extension company. Finally, I targeted a boutique fitness application that paid her handsomely for a monthly promotional post. 4 major corporate sponsors. 4 devastating, undeniable emails loaded with concrete forensic evidence. I reviewed the attachments one final time, ensured the encryption routing was perfectly secure, and hit send. Then I sat back in my leather office chair and waited. The corporate world often moves at a sluggish pace, but public relations departments facing potential influencer scandals move with absolute lightning speed. I kept Britney's social media feeds open on my secondary monitor, watching the comments section continue to churn with misplaced anger directed at me. They had no idea that the ground beneath their favorite digital creator was already giving way. Within 2 hours, the very first domino fell heavily. The organic skincare brand posted a formal public statement on their official social media channels. They announced the immediate termination of their partnership with Brittany Blackwood. The brand cited a profound misalignment of core values and a strict commitment to authentic representation. They explicitly stated that they do not tolerate deceptive practices from their brand ambassadors. Brittany's rabid comment section noticed the corporate statement almost immediately. The relentless tide of the internet mob shifted with breathtaking speed. The same followers who had been violently attacking my inactive accounts suddenly began questioning Brittany. The comments rapidly changed from supportive outrage to intense, demanding curiosity. People wanted to know why her biggest sponsor had dropped her so abruptly. Before Britney could attempt to spin a lie to contain the growing panic, the fast fashion brand dropped her. They did not just post a polite public statement. They sent a swift, aggressive public reply to her most recent video, demanding she immediately remove all sponsored content featuring their products from her pages due to a breach of contract regarding fraudulent lifestyle representation. Britney desperately tried to do damage control. She posted a frantic, shaky live video claiming her accounts were currently under a sophisticated hacking attack. However, she was visibly sweating, her hands were shaking, and her voice lacked the polished, arrogant confidence of her earlier broadcasts. She looked exactly like what she truly was, a terrified teenager caught in a massive web of her own lies. While she was live on camera, the third and fourth brands pulled their sponsorships simultaneously. The luxury hair extension company released a statement condemning financial deception, sealing her fate completely. I watched as her comment section devolved into absolute chaos. Her loyal defenders turned into a vicious pack of wolves. They realized the luxury lifestyle they had admired was entirely fake, funded by stolen credit cards and defaulted leases. My burner phone suddenly buzzed on my desk. It was a text message from an unknown number, but the frantic tone clearly belonged to Stephanie. "What did you do to her sponsors? Fix this right now, or I swear I will make you pay for ruining my daughter." I calmly took a screenshot of the threat, forwarded it directly to my corporate security team and my attorney, and then permanently blocked the number. I did not bother replying. Engaging with them was beneath me now. I turned my attention back to the monitors and watched the follower count on Britney's profile start to violently plummet. The internet loves nothing more than a spectacular, undeniable downfall. Digital drama channels began uploading long video essays about the fake rich girl getting brutally exposed. Internet sleuths dug up public records of the BMW repossession, which someone at the local tow yard had leaked to a neighborhood gossip blog. They posted photos of the luxury car sitting miserably in an impound lot. The digital takedown was absolute, swift, and entirely irreversible. Britney's lucrative career as a social media influencer was dead before she even graduated high school. She had built a fragile empire entirely on my hidden generosity, and I had simply removed the foundational pillars. The facade was completely shattered, leaving her exposed to the exact same merciless public humiliation she had gleefully tried to orchestrate against me. I felt a cold, deep satisfaction settling into my bones. This was never just about a ruined silk blazer or a spilled glass of wine. It was about systematically tearing down the deeply toxic matrix of lies, manipulation, and financial abuse my family had built over decades. I picked up my coffee mug and took a long, victorious sip. Stephanie and Brittany had been entirely neutralized, but the war was far from over. Terrence was still out there scrambling to save his fake businesses, and I knew his sheer desperation would inevitably lead him right into the final inescapable legal trap I was setting for him. Terrence was pacing holes into the imported rugs of his suburban mansion. His reality was unraveling at a terrifying speed. The secondary creditors were calling his cell phone relentlessly. His shell companies were completely out of capital. The monthly minimum payments he usually covered using my corporate credit lines were bouncing, triggering a cascade of automated default notices. Without the massive cash flow I had secretly provided for 5 years, his entire identity as a visionary entrepreneur was bleeding out on the floor. He needed cash immediately. He could not go to a traditional bank. His credit score was abysmal, and federal underwriters would instantly flag his empty companies as massive fraud risks. He could not go to his wealthy friends at the country club because those relationships were built entirely on the illusion that he was the wealthiest man in the room. Asking them for a bridge loan would shatter his carefully cultivated alpha male persona. He only had one viable target left. He needed to extract money from the easiest, most gullible marks he had ever known: my parents. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Terrence packed his sleek leather briefcase and drove his remaining leased vehicle to the sprawling estate where Beatrice and William lived. He did not know that he was driving to a property legally owned by Vanguard Forensic and Capital. He fully believed my parents held the deed free and clear. He believed they were sitting on millions of dollars of untapped equity. He marched through the heavy oak front doors with the frantic energy of a man fighting for his life. He found Beatrice sitting in the formal living room, aggressively rubbing her temples. William was pacing near the fireplace. The atmosphere in the house was incredibly tense. Beatrice was still reeling from the profound humiliation of having her platinum card declined at the country club. To make matters worse, Stephanie had just called them, sobbing uncontrollably about Brittany losing all her lucrative brand deals on the internet. The family's social standing was currently in freefall. Terrence did not offer comfort. He immediately went into full salesman mode, weaponizing their panic for his own financial gain. He dropped his briefcase onto the antique coffee table, popped the latches, and pulled out a glossy, professionally printed pitch deck. He spread the documents out in front of my distressed parents. "Listen to me, Beatrice," Terrence said, using his deepest, most authoritative voice. "I know today has been incredibly stressful. Clara has clearly suffered a complete mental breakdown. She is having a psychotic episode and lashing out at this family out of pure jealousy. But we are not going to let her temporary insanity destroy our family legacy. We are going to pivot. We are going to show the entire Chicago social scene that we are completely untouchable." Beatrice looked up, her eyes wide and desperate for a lifeline. "How, Terrence?" "My credit card was declined in front of the charity committee president. Brittany is being humiliated on social media. People are whispering about us. We look absolutely ridiculous." "We changed the narrative," Terrence declared, slamming his hand on the table for emphasis. "We project absolute dominance. Brittany's 18th birthday is coming up next month. We do not cancel the party. We upgrade it. We throw the most lavish, expensive, exclusive gala this city has seen in a decade. We invite every major socialite, every brand executive, and every wealthy investor in our network. We show them that Clara's little tantrum did absolutely zero damage to our bottom line." William stopped pacing and looked at his son-in-law. "That sounds wonderful, Terrence. But Stephanie said Clara froze the family trust accounts. We do not have the liquid cash for an event like that right now." "That is exactly why I am here," Terrence said, moving in for the kill. He tapped the glossy pitch deck. "I have an unprecedented investment opportunity. It is a revolutionary, decentralized real estate fund integrated with a new cryptocurrency platform. I have the exclusive rights to the initial coin offering. It is a guaranteed, massive return. I am talking about tripling our investment in less than 4 weeks. The institutional buyers are practically begging me to let them in, but I want to keep this wealth inside the family. Beatrice squinted at the complex diagrams full of meaningless corporate buzzwords. Terrence, you know we do not understand technology. How does this help us right now? I need seed capital to secure the blockchain infrastructure. Terrence lied smoothly, not missing a single beat. The trust accounts are temporarily frozen because of Clara's illegal hacking, but we have a massive, entirely untapped asset right here. This house. You own this estate free and clear. You have millions in pure equity just sitting here doing absolutely nothing. We take out a short-term commercial mortgage against the property. We pull out $500,000 in cash. I inject those funds into my crypto real estate platform. Within 30 days, the platform goes public. We make millions. We pay off the mortgage entirely. And we fund Brittany's birthday gala with the profits. It is a foolproof synergistic maneuver. Beatrice hesitated, her hands trembling as she touched the velvet sofa cushions. Terrence taking a mortgage against the family estate is a huge risk. We promised we would never put the house in jeopardy again after the crash 5 years ago. Are you going to let Clara win? Terrence demanded, shifting his tactic from persuasion to aggressive manipulation. Are you going to let that bitter, jealous girl ruin your reputation at the country club? Are you going to let her destroy your granddaughter's future? Clara wants you to feel poor. She wants you to panic. Taking this equity pull is how we fight back. It is how we prove that we do not need her or her fake accounting job. The mention of my name and the threat to her social status struck the exact nerve Terrence was aiming for. Beatrice's posture stiffened. Her vanity and her desperate need to maintain the illusion of superiority over me completely overrode any logical financial sense she might have possessed. She looked at William and gave a firm, resolute nod. William sighed, clearly intimidated by Terrence's aggressive confidence. If you are absolutely sure the returns are guaranteed, Terrence, we cannot afford to lose this house. It is our primary legacy. I am a professional venture capitalist. William Terrence lied with a straight face. I do not lose. I will handle all the paperwork. All you have to do is sign the documents when I bring them. We will secure the cash, launch the fund, and throw a party that will make Clara look like the pathetic, irrelevant liar she truly is. Terrence grinned victorious. He packed up his worthless pitch deck and walked out of the house, firmly believing he had just secured his salvation. He was so blinded by his own arrogance and desperation that he never once considered the possibility that the house he was planning to leverage did not actually belong to William and Beatrice. He was about to walk straight into the bank and attempt to mortgage a property owned by the very woman he was trying to destroy. Early the next morning, Terrence orchestrated the family field trip to the downtown branch of the premier commercial bank in Chicago. He wore his sharpest navy blue suit, carrying his leather briefcase, like a weapon of mass financial destruction. Beatrice and William followed closely behind him. Beatrice had draped herself in her finest cashmere coat, clutching a vintage Chanel handbag, desperately projecting the image of a wealthy matriarch, merely conducting routine portfolio maintenance. William marched with a rigid posture, silently praying that Terrence actually knew what he was doing. They strode across the polished marble floor of the bank lobby, completely oblivious to the massive brick wall of reality they were about to hit at full speed. Terrence approached the reception desk with absolute arrogance and demanded a meeting with a senior loan officer. Because of my parents' historical profile at this specific branch, they were quickly escorted into a glass-walled corner office. A seasoned loan officer named Mr. Caldwell stood up from his mahogany desk to greet them. Caldwell was a meticulous, numbers-driven man who had worked in commercial banking for 30 years. He was exactly the kind of professional who relied entirely on verified data, rather than flashy pitch decks and empty corporate buzzwords. Please have a seat, Mr. Caldwell offered politely, gesturing to the plush leather chairs opposite his desk. How can I assist the Blackwood and Williams family today? Terrence took the lead immediately. He dropped his briefcase onto the desk and leaned forward, attempting to dominate the physical space. We are executing a highly strategic liquidity event, Caldwell. We need to initiate an expedited equity pull against the family estate in the suburbs. We are looking for a $500,000 short-term commercial mortgage. We plan to deploy these funds into a high-yield decentralized real estate platform. We need the cash wired by the end of the business week to secure our positional advantage. Mr. Caldwell blinked clearly unimpressed by the frantic barrage of meaningless corporate jargon. He adjusted his glasses and looked at William and Beatrice. You are looking to take out a $500,000 mortgage against the primary residence. Are you looking for a traditional home equity line of credit or a reverse mortgage structure? A traditional equity loan. William answered, his voice wavering slightly. The house is completely paid off. We own it free and clear. It should be a very simple transaction. Mr. Caldwell nodded slowly and turned to his computer monitor. Certainly. Let me just pull up the property records and verify the current estimated valuation to get the preliminary paperwork started. What is the exact street address? Beatrice proudly recited the address of the sprawling suburban estate she had called home for the past 2 decades. She sat up straighter, waiting for the banker to compliment the prestige and high market value of the neighborhood. She fully expected him to roll out the red carpet and beg them to take the bank's money. Caldwell typed the information into his secure terminal. The office was dead silent, except for the rhythmic clicking of his keyboard. Terrence checked his luxury watch, tapping his foot impatiently against the carpet. He was already spending the money in his head, calculating exactly how much he would divert to save his failing shell companies and how much he would use to throw Brittany her lavish birthday gala. Suddenly, the rhythmic clicking stopped. Mr. Caldwell frowned, leaning closer to his monitor. He tapped another key, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He looked away from the screen and stared directly at my parents. Mr. Williams Caldwell said, his voice dropping into a cautious, highly professional register. There seems to be a significant discrepancy here. You stated that you own this property free and clear. We absolutely do. Beatrice snapped, instantly defensive at the perceived slight. We have lived there for 20 years. There is no mortgage on that house. There is no mortgage, Caldwell agreed calmly. But according to the county registry and the verified title database, you are not the legal owners of this property. Terrence let out a loud, condescending laugh. What are you talking about, Caldwell? The system must be glitching. Refresh your screen. They are the sole proprietors of the estate. I assure you the system is functioning perfectly, Caldwell replied, turning his monitor so the three of them could see the official county records displayed on the screen. The property at this address was transferred via a distressed debt purchase exactly 5 years ago. The current deed is held entirely by a corporate entity named Vanguard Property Holdings. William and Beatrice Williams are listed solely as residential tenants on a specialized long-term lease agreement. You do not hold a single dollar of equity in this estate. The air in the glass office vanished completely. Beatrice grasped the armrests of her chair, her face turning an alarming shade of chalk white. William stared at the glowing computer screen as if it were written in an alien language. The words Vanguard Property Holdings burned into his retinas. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The incredibly wealthy silent investor who had miraculously saved them from foreclosure 5 years ago was the very same corporate entity that managed my wealth management firm. They had just been told by a bank executive that the daughter they despised was their actual landlord. That is impossible, Terrence shouted, jumping up from his chair. His carefully crafted composure shattered instantly. This is a massive clerical error. My in-laws established a blind trust to protect their assets from liability. That Vanguard entity is just a shell company managing their trust. They are the beneficial owners. Caldwell did not flinch. He looked at Terrence with total unyielding professional detachment. Sir, I do not care what internal family arrangements you believe are in place. The legal title is crystalline. The deed belongs to Vanguard Property Holdings. A bank cannot issue a $500,000 mortgage to residential tenants. To leverage this property, you would need the notarized authorized signature of Vanguard's managing director. Until that individual walks into my office and signs the underwriting documents, this conversation is over. Terrence's jaw clenched so tightly it looked like his teeth might crack. His entire salvation strategy had just hit an impenetrable brick wall. He could not get the cash through a legitimate bank because the house legally belonged to me. If he told the bank the truth, they would throw him out. If he tried to forge my signature on federal bank documents inside a major financial institution, he would be arrested on the spot. "This bank is a joke," Terrence spat, grabbing his briefcase off the desk. "Your databases are archaic and completely misaligned with modern corporate trust structures. We will take our business to an institution that actually understands high-level wealth management. Let us go, William." Beatrice and William were too stunned to argue. They stood up mechanically, their faces completely drained of their usual arrogant pride. They were utterly humiliated, forced to do the walk of shame out of the prestigious bank lobby under the watchful eyes of the security guards. The moment the heavy glass doors of the bank closed behind them, the crisp Chicago wind hit their faces. Beatrice grabbed Terrence by the arm, her voice trembling with sheer panic. "Terrence, what does this mean? Why does the bank think Clara's company owns our house? How are we going to fund the real estate project? How are we going to pay for Brittany's gala? We have already sent out the invitations." Terrence's mind was spinning out of control. He was cornered, desperate, and running out of time. He looked at his terrified in-laws and made a fatal decision. He chose to double down on the deception. "Do not panic." Beatrice Terrence lied smoothly, desperately trying to regain his alpha posture. This is exactly why traditional banks are failing. They do not understand sophisticated asset protection. Clara probably filed a minor administrative extension that temporarily obscured your beneficial ownership. It is a completely standard bureaucratic hurdle. William looked deeply uncertain. "But Caldwell said we need Clara's signature. She will never sign anything for us now." "We do not need her signature," Terrence declared, his eyes darkening with malicious intent. "We just need a legal professional who knows how to properly cut through the red tape and override these ridiculous corporate roadblocks. I know a guy, a private attorney who specializes in expedited title transfers and private equity lending. We will bypass the traditional banking system entirely. We will go straight to the private sector and get our cash by Friday." The very next afternoon, Terrence directed his leased luxury sedan into a decaying industrial park on the outskirts of the city. He parked in front of a drab, unassuming brick building. There were no polished marble columns or soaring glass atriums here. A faded brass plaque next to the entrance simply read the name, "Simon Cole, Attorney at Law." Beatrice clutched her Chanel handbag tightly against her chest, looking at the cracked sidewalk with absolute disgust. She refused to believe that salvation for her wealthy lifestyle could possibly exist in such a pathetic, run-down location. William trailed closely behind her, his anxiety mounting with every single step. Simon Cole was exactly the kind of bottom-feeder lawyer who thrived in the murky gray areas of corporate finance. He made his living entirely by facilitating extremely shady real estate transfers and securing high-interest predatory bridge loans for desperate clients who had exhausted all legitimate avenues. He sat behind a cluttered, scratched wooden desk, wearing a cheap suit that smelled faintly of stale cigar smoke. He did not ask ethical questions. He only asked for a non-refundable upfront retainer fee. Terrence walked into the cramped office with unearned swagger and slammed his briefcase onto the desk. He immediately launched into his fabricated narrative. He explained that William and Beatrice were the rightful beneficial owners of a highly valuable suburban estate currently held in a blind trust by Vanguard Property Holdings. He claimed that an insubordinate rogue employee named Clara was temporarily refusing to release the equity for a critical corporate pivot. Terrence demanded that Simon find an immediate loophole to bypass Clara and authorize a $500,000 equity pull against the house. Simon leaned back in his squeaky chair, steepling his fingers together. He looked at the frantic faces of my parents and the sweating forehead of my brother-in-law. He knew instantly that Terrence was lying about the corporate structure. He knew they were desperate, and desperation was highly profitable. Simon explained that transferring a deed away from a holding company without the explicit notarized signature of the managing director was completely impossible under standard banking regulations. However, he leaned forward and offered a highly illegal alternative. He asked William if he still possessed any old broad power of attorney documents that Clara might have signed years ago before the property was placed into the holding company. Beatrice gasped suddenly, remembering a stack of legal paperwork they had forced me to sign when I was a naive 22-year-old college graduate. Back then, they demanded I grant them financial oversight because they believed I was entirely incapable of managing my own meager savings. Those outdated documents had never been officially revoked. Simon smiled a dark, predatory smile. He laid out a terrifyingly simple, highly illegal strategy. They would use the old power of attorney to draft a brand new quitclaim deed. They would fraudulently state that Vanguard Property Holdings was willingly transferring the title of the estate entirely back into William's name. Simon would then backdate the signatures and use his own corrupt notary public to stamp the documents, making them look completely official to a casual observer. Once the fraudulent deed was filed with the county clerk, the property would appear to belong to William again. William hesitated, his hands shaking. He looked at Simon and asked if forging a corporate transfer was illegal. He asked if they could go to prison for falsifying real estate documents. Terence immediately stepped in to completely crush William's sudden attack of conscience. Terence aggressively manipulated the narrative, twisting the undeniable felony into a righteous act of family preservation. He told William that the house rightfully belonged to him. He argued that they were not stealing anything. They were simply correcting a frustrating clerical error created by a bitter, jealous daughter. Terence insisted that Clara was the actual criminal for freezing their trust funds and leaving Brittany without a vehicle. He promised William that once the cryptocurrency real estate fund launched and generated millions in pure profit, they would pay off the loan immediately. Clara would never even know the transaction happened. Beatrice eagerly agreed with Terence. Her insatiable greed and desperate need to maintain her country club status completely blinded her to the massive legal consequences. She told William to stop being a coward. She reminded him that they had invitations to send out for Brittany's massive 18th birthday gala. She absolutely refused to be publicly humiliated by her youngest daughter. She demanded that William sign the papers and secure the cash. William looked at his wife, then at Terence, and finally at the corrupt lawyer. He took a deep breath, picked up the cheap plastic pen from the desk, and signed his name on the fraudulent quitclaim deed. He committed wire fraud, title fraud, and grand larceny in a single stroke of ink. Beatrice snatched the pen and signed her name as a witness. Terence smiled triumphantly, believing he had just executed the greatest financial maneuver of his entire life. Simon gathered the forged documents and locked them away in his filing cabinet. He promised to submit the paperwork to the county clerk by the end of the day. He also promised to connect Terence with a private equity lending firm that specialized in high-risk short-term commercial mortgages. Simon assured them the $500,000 would be wired into Terence's business account by Friday morning. They walked out of the miserable, cramped office feeling completely victorious. They climbed back into the leased luxury sedan, celebrating their apparent triumph. Terence bragged loudly about his sheer brilliance. Beatrice immediately started calling elite caterers and luxury event planners, booking custom ice sculptures for the upcoming party. They thought they had found a brilliant loophole that bypassed my authority. They had absolutely no idea that my lead corporate attorney was already monitoring the county clerk database. The stage was perfectly set. The trap was now armed. 48 hours later, I was sitting behind the massive glass desk in my corner office, reviewing a forensic audit for an international shipping conglomerate. The city of Chicago hummed quietly far below my window, a sprawling grid of commerce and consequence. My desk phone flashed with a high-priority internal notification. It was my lead corporate attorney, Harrison. I picked up the receiver, keeping my eyes fixed on the financial spreadsheets illuminating my dual monitors. "We have movement," Harrison announced, his voice tight with professional anticipation. The county clerk database just registered a new filing for the Beacon Hill estate. A quitclaim deed was submitted electronically 20 minutes ago. It purports to transfer the entire property title from Vanguard Property Holdings directly back into your father's personal name. The signatures are completely forged, just as we anticipated. They used an extremely outdated power of attorney document that holds absolutely zero legal weight in this jurisdiction. I leaned back in my leather chair, a slow, predatory smile creeping across my face. It was one thing to anticipate their sheer stupidity, but it was entirely another to watch them execute it with such blatant disregard for federal law. They had officially crossed the line from entitled freeloaders to documented felons. "Did they submit the loan application yet?" I asked calmly. Harrison tapped his keyboard, pulling up the incoming data streams from our subsidiary lending branches. "Yes. The corrupt attorney they hired just routed a $500,000 commercial bridge loan request. He sent it to Apex Bridge Capital. He clearly targeted Apex because they are known for approving high-risk short-term liquidity loans with minimal underwriting questions. He has absolutely no idea that Apex Bridge Capital is wholly owned by your parent corporation." He walked right through our front door. "Forward the application packet directly to my secure terminal," I instructed. "I want to personally review the underwriting terms." Within seconds, the encrypted file dropped into my inbox. I opened the digital document and began reading through Terrence's desperate financial maneuvers. It was a masterclass in aggressive, fraudulent accounting. Terrence had listed the Beacon Hill estate as the primary collateral, falsely claiming $5 million in unencumbered equity based on the forged deed. He had also fabricated a highly inflated revenue projection for his imaginary cryptocurrency real estate fund, promising the lender a massive return on investment within 30 days. He was asking for $500,000 in raw cash to be wired directly into his personal holding account by Friday morning. "He thinks he is a genius," I murmured to myself, scrolling through his fabricated profit and loss statements. "He truly believes he has found a brilliant loophole." Harrison cleared his throat over the speakerphone. "We can flag the fraud right now, Clara. We can notify the authorities, freeze the transaction, and have the police waiting at his house before dinner. The forged deed alone carries a mandatory minimum sentence." "No," I replied sharply. "If we arrest him now, my parents will simply play the victims. They will claim they were tricked by their son-in-law. Stephanie will cry to the judge, claiming she knew nothing about the financial arrangements. They will bond him out, hire a decent defense lawyer, and drag this out in court for 3 years. I do not want a drawn-out legal battle, Harrison. I want absolute, undeniable destruction. I want them to spend the money." "You want to approve a fraudulent loan?" Harrison asked, his voice betraying a hint of lawyerly concern. "I want to underwrite a highly targeted, custom-tailored financial guillotine," I corrected him. "I am going to approve the $500,000 cash disbursement, but we are going to drastically rewrite the collateral requirements. A standard bridge loan against a residential property is too simple. We need to legally bind Terrence to the absolute floor." I opened the underwriting modification software and began typing out the revised lending terms. I stripped away the standard boilerplate language and inserted aggressive predatory clauses designed specifically for high-net-worth individuals who thought they were smarter than the bank. First, I added a comprehensive personal guarantee clause. The loan would not just be secured by the fraudulent house deed. I legally attached every single remaining asset Terrence possessed. I tied the debt to his 3 empty shell companies in Delaware. I attached his personal checking and savings accounts. I included a blanket lien on all his luxury vehicles, his expensive watch collection, and any cryptocurrency wallets registered in his name. Second, I drafted a draconian cross-collateralization clause involving my sister. To secure the funds, Stephanie would be required to sign as a co-guarantor. The clause explicitly stated that in the event of a default, the lending institution had the immediate, uncontestable right to seize her future inheritance, her personal jewelry collections, and any assets held in her name. Finally, I implemented a catastrophic default penalty. If the principal loan was not repaid in full within exactly 30 days, the interest rate would automatically skyrocket to the absolute legal maximum, and the lender would be granted immediate authorization to liquidate all attached assets without requiring a secondary court judgment. I reviewed the modified contract. It was a financial death warrant. Anyone with a shred of basic business literacy would take one look at those aggressive terms and run in the opposite direction. But Terrence was not a businessman. He was a desperate, arrogant narcissist drowning in debt. I sent the revised contract back to Harrison. Send this counteroffer to their attorney. Tell them Apex Bridge Capital requires these exact terms to expedite the cash wire by Friday morning. Do not negotiate a single word. Harrison reviewed the file. This is brutal, Clara. If he signs this, he is signing away his entire life. He is already doing that, I said coldly. I am simply giving him the pen. Less than 2 hours later, the fully executed contract appeared in my digital inbox. Terrence had signed it. Stephanie had signed it. William and Beatrice had signed it. They had been in such a frantic, greedy rush to secure the $500,000 that they had clearly skipped reading the complex liability clauses altogether. They saw the approval notice, blinded by the promise of immediate liquid cash, and eagerly handed over their entire existence. I authorized the wire transfer. The funds moved from my corporate holdings directly into Terrence's designated bank account. The bait had been taken. The trap was now securely closed around their ankles. They thought they were rich again. They thought they had outsmarted me. They were about to spend a fortune they did not actually have, setting the stage for their own spectacular downfall. The moment the $500,000 hit Terrence's business checking account, a wave of sheer, unadulterated euphoria washed over the suburban mansion. I did not need to be in the room to know exactly how the scene played out. I had spent enough years observing their predictable patterns of greed. Terrence undoubtedly held his smartphone up for the entire family to see, pointing to the massive six-figure balance glowing brightly on the screen. He would have puffed out his chest, claiming his unmatched financial genius had single-handedly saved the family from my jealous corporate sabotage. Beatrice and William instantly shed their previous panic. The terrifying reality that they had almost lost their home was completely erased by the intoxicating influx of raw cash. In their minds, the crisis was officially over. The natural order of the universe had been restored. They were wealthy socialites once again, and I was just the bitter, estranged daughter who had utterly failed to bring them down. But the most dramatic shift occurred in Stephanie and her daughter. Brittany had spent the last 48 hours locked in her bedroom, sobbing hysterically as brand after brand publicly severed ties with her. Her influencer empire was in absolute ruins. The internet was still mercilessly mocking her repossessed car and her fake luxury lifestyle. Stephanie realized that a standard public relations apology would never fix the catastrophic damage I had inflicted on her daughter's digital reputation. They needed a massive, undeniable display of extreme wealth to prove the internet haters wrong. They decided to turn Brittany's upcoming 18th birthday into an absurdly lavish high society gala. It was no longer just a celebration. It was a strategic weapon designed to fiercely reclaim their dominance in the Chicago social scene. Stephanie immediately commandeered the dining room table, transforming it into a high-speed event planning command center. She began funneling the loan money with absolutely zero restraint. The first call went to the premier event coordinator at the Waldorf Astoria. Stephanie secured their grandest ballroom, slapping down a non-refundable $25,000 deposit without blinking an eye. She did not negotiate the exorbitant catering fees or the premium open bar packages for the adult guests. She simply handed over Terrence's new routing numbers and told the hotel management that money was absolutely no object. Brittany wiped her tears and grabbed her laptop, her massive ego instantly inflating back to its original size. If she was going to prove her immense wealth to her millions of former followers, she needed to create a visual spectacle that screamed unlimited capital. She hired a notoriously expensive celebrity event designer to handle the aesthetics. The invoices started flying through the banking network. I sat in my office downtown watching the transactions register on the back end of the loan disbursement portal. It was a masterclass in aggressive, unchecked financial ruin. $10,000 was wired to a European floral boutique for imported, out-of-season white orchids to cover every single table in the sprawling ballroom. $15,000 went to securing a popular music producer to fly in and serve as the private disc jockey for the night. Another $8,000 was spent on custom-carved ice sculptures, including a massive life-sized replica of a sports car, to replace the one I had legally repossessed. They were literally burning through high-interest short-term loan money to buy frozen water that would melt into puddles by the end of the evening. Stephanie then dragged Brittany to the most exclusive bridal and evening wear boutique in the city. They bypassed the standard evening gowns and moved straight to the custom couture section. Brittany selected a heavily beaded custom-tailored gown that cost upwards of $12,000. Stephanie bought herself a matching designer cocktail dress, eagerly swiping the newly activated debit cards linked to Terrence's corporate account. The sheer level of financial delusion was staggering. Terrence had secured the loan by explicitly promising the bank he was injecting the capital into a highly lucrative cryptocurrency real estate fund. In reality, less than a quarter of the money went toward his fake business ventures just to keep up basic corporate appearances. The vast majority of the $500,000 was being actively incinerated to fund a teenager's birthday party. Beatrice and William were completely complicit in the madness. Rather than questioning the reckless spending, my mother was busy aggressively curating the guest list. She targeted the wealthiest, most influential members of her country club. She wanted to ensure that the exact women who had witnessed her credit card decline earlier that week were sitting in the front row to witness this spectacular display of status. She hired a professional calligrapher to handwrite the invitations on thick gold foil embossed cardstock. Every single decision they made was driven by a desperate, suffocating need to project superiority. They were entirely focused on the temporary high of spending the money, completely ignoring the catastrophic reality of the legally binding terms they had eagerly signed. They did not care about the predatory interest rates. They did not care about the strict 30-day repayment deadline. They were living in a total fantasy world funded entirely by a loan they could never possibly repay. As the days ticked down toward the event, the family's arrogance reached an all-time high. Brittany started posting teaser videos on her new private social media accounts, bragging relentlessly about the upcoming gala. She posted sneak peeks of the venue, the floral arrangements, and the custom dress fabrics. She was actively taunting her critics, promising them the biggest social comeback in internet history. Stephanie and Terrence strutted around their suburban neighborhood with their heads held high. They genuinely believed they had successfully navigated a minor financial speed bump. They thought they had secured their future and permanently put me in my place. They were blissfully unaware that the ground beneath their feet was completely hollow. I monitored every single outgoing wire transfer from my secure terminal. I watched the loan principal rapidly deplete from $500,000 down to $400,000, then $300,000. I archived every receipt, every luxury purchase, and every catering deposit. I was meticulously building the exact financial footprint I needed to prove gross negligence and loan fraud when the time came to drop the hammer. They were throwing the party of the century, but I was the one pulling all the strings. The stage was being beautifully set for a very public execution of their social standing, and they were the ones eagerly paying for the scaffolding. Exactly 1 week before the extravagant event, a courier arrived at the heavily guarded lobby of Vanguard Forensic and Capital. David, my branch manager, personally brought the delivery up to my corner office. He knocked once and walked in holding a thick, oversized envelope made of heavy cream cardstock. It was sealed with a ridiculous amount of gold wax stamped with a custom crest. I took a silver letter opener and sliced through the pretentious wax seal. Inside was a massive gold foil embossed invitation. "You are cordially invited to the social event of the season," it read in swirling calligraphy. Brittany Blackwood's 18th birthday gala. The Waldorf Astoria. Formal black tie required. Tucked behind the main invitation was a piece of personalized stationery. Stephanie's jagged, aggressive handwriting covered the page. I read the words carefully, marveling at the sheer, unadulterated delusion radiating from the ink. "Clara, we secured the funding despite your jealous little temper tantrum. We are completely untouchable. Come to the Waldorf on Saturday and see how real wealth actually lives. Make sure you wear that cheap little suit of yours. You can stand in the back and watch us shine." I set the note down on my glass desk and let out a sharp, genuine laugh. Stephanie was so utterly desperate to prove her dominance that she had proactively invited the architect of her impending destruction to watch the building collapse. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to parade her stolen, fraudulent wealth in my face and watch me cower in the shadows. I picked up my office phone and dialed my personal tailor. "Yes, Francois," I said into the receiver. "I need the bespoke midnight blue suit we designed last month. I need it rushed for this weekend. I have an incredibly important corporate execution to attend on Saturday evening. I require absolute perfection. The fabric needs to scream power, and the cut must be flawless." I hung up and walked over to the hidden wall safe in my office. I entered the biometric passcode and pulled open the heavy steel door. Inside sat several velvet display boxes containing assets I rarely wore in public. I reached for a specific box and opened it. Resting on the dark velvet was a Patek Philippe Grand Complications timepiece. It was a masterpiece of Swiss engineering valued at over $200,000. It was not a flashy diamond-encrusted bauble like the cheap depreciating items Terence loved to flaunt. It was a subtle, quiet declaration of immense liquid wealth. Anyone with actual money would recognize it instantly. Anyone pretending to be rich would just feel inexplicably intimidated by its presence. I buzzed Harrison on the secure internal line. "Harrison, I need the full legal packet finalized by Friday afternoon. I want the default notices, the eviction papers for the Beacon Hill estate, and the comprehensive wire fraud dossier neatly bound in branded corporate folders. Bring a digital copy on a highly secure flash drive as well. I plan on making a visual presentation at the event." Harrison chuckled over the speakerphone. "You are really going to drop the hammer at the Waldorf Astoria?" he asked. "I am going to drop the entire building on them," I corrected him. "Make sure the private investigators have all their assets officially locked down the moment the clock strikes midnight on Saturday. I want their bank accounts completely drained of any remaining fraudulent funds the exact second they try to pay the final catering bill." I knew exactly what my mother Beatrice was planning for this evening. She had undoubtedly curated the guest list to include every single affluent member of her precious country club. She wanted an audience. She needed to prove to those snobby women that the Blackwood family was entirely immune to financial hardship. She was using her granddaughter's birthday as a desperate, pathetic shield to hide her own massive insecurities. And Terence was likely planning to use the gathering to network, hoping to lure some gullible, wealthy investor into his completely fabricated cryptocurrency real estate platform before his predatory bridge loan came due. They were all playing a dangerous game of pretend dancing on the edge of a massive cliff. Saturday arrived with a crisp, cool breeze sweeping off Lake Michigan. I spent the afternoon at a private salon getting my hair blown out into a sleek, straight style that projected absolute authority. My makeup was sharp, clean, and entirely intimidating. When I slipped into the bespoke midnight blue suit, the transformation was complete. The fabric moved like liquid armor. The tailoring was so precise it felt like a second skin. I strapped the heavy platinum Patek Philippe to my wrist. It felt like a ticking time bomb counting down the final hours of my family's arrogant illusion. My private driver pulled the armored town car up to the curb of my building. I slid into the back seat, placing the heavy leather briefcase containing their financial death warrants onto the seat beside me. The drive toward the Waldorf Astoria took exactly 25 minutes. I watched the city lights passing by, feeling an incredible surge of adrenaline. For 33 years, I had walked into family gatherings with my shoulders slumped, bracing myself for their endless barrage of cruel insults and petty criticisms. I had always tried to blend into the background, desperate to avoid catching my mother's disapproving glare or my sister's malicious mockery. Tonight was entirely different. I was not walking into that ballroom as the invisible, disappointing middle child. I was walking in as the majority shareholder, the sole title holder, and the primary creditor who literally owned their entire existence. They wanted me to stand in the back and watch them shine. I was going to stand center stage and pull the plug on their spotlight. The town car turned smoothly onto the glamorous driveway of the hotel. Valets in crisp uniforms were rushing around, opening doors for the city's wealthy elite. Flashing cameras from hired event photographers illuminated the grand entrance. Stephanie and Terrence had clearly spared absolutely no expense to make this look like a celebrity gala. I stepped out of the car adjusting my cuffs. The cool night air energized me. I grasped the handle of my briefcase and walked confidently toward the towering golden doors of the Waldorf Astoria. The execution was officially underway. I stepped through the heavy golden doors of the Waldorf Astoria and immediately felt the suffocating wave of my family's financial delusion. The grand foyer had been completely transformed into a vulgar display of stolen wealth. A massive floral archway made entirely of imported white orchids framed the entrance to the main ballroom. Two towering ice sculptures flanked the doorway, glistening under the crystal chandeliers. One was a replica of the sports car I had repossessed, and the other was a giant number 18 dripping with melting condensation. The sheer amount of cash burning in this room was staggering. I handed my embossed invitation to the tuxedo-clad attendant at the door. He checked my name against a digital tablet, gave a polite nod, and pulled back the heavy velvet curtains to let me inside. The scale of the ballroom was breathtaking. Hundreds of guests milled about holding flutes of vintage champagne and balancing tiny plates of caviar. A celebrity music producer was spinning tracks on a raised stage surrounded by custom laser lighting. Brittany was holding court in the center of the room, wearing her $12,000 couture gown, posing for professional photographers while pretending her internet reputation was not currently in a state of absolute ruin. I did not rush. I walked into the room with slow, measured steps, letting my presence register organically. My midnight blue bespoke suit caught the ambient light, the immaculate tailoring distinguishing me from the sea of rented tuxedos and off-the-rack evening gowns. I held my leather briefcase in my left hand, making sure the sleeve of my jacket rode up just enough to expose the heavy platinum face of my Patek Philippe watch. Stephanie was the first one to spot me. She was standing near a towering champagne pyramid, laughing loudly, with a group of country club wives. I watched her eyes land on me. Her laughter died instantly in her throat. She froze, her champagne flute hovering inches from her mouth. She expected me to arrive in a cheap polyester skirt suit, looking nervous and defeated. She expected me to cower in the corner, overwhelmed by her majestic display of superiority. Instead, she was looking at a woman who radiated absolute, undeniable power. Stephanie elbowed my mother Beatrice, who was busy trying to impress a local politician nearby. Beatrice turned around, an irritated scowl forming on her face, until she followed Stephanie's gaze and saw me standing near the ice sculptures. My mother actually gasped. She took a physical step backward, her eyes darting frantically from my perfectly tailored suit to the blindingly expensive watch resting on my wrist. The visual evidence of my actual wealth was causing a severe short circuit in her brain. She could not comprehend how the daughter she had deemed a pathetic low-level failure was standing in a five-star hotel looking like a Wall Street titan. William noticed them staring and turned his head. His reaction was different. He did not look angry. He looked terrified. Perhaps some deep-buried instinct warned him that my calm demeanor was extremely dangerous. He grabbed Beatrice by the arm, whispering something urgent in her ear, but she yanked herself away, her face flushing with renewed indignation. She was not going to let me ruin her perfect social performance. Brittany finally noticed the shift in the room's energy. She turned away from the flashing cameras and locked eyes with me. Her arrogant smile vanished. She looked at my suit, then looked down at her own ridiculously expensive dress, suddenly realizing that true power did not require layers of sequins and tulle. True power walked into a room and commanded silence without saying a single word. I did not walk toward them. I simply stood my ground near the entrance, allowing them to feel the full crushing weight of my arrival. I was not there to mingle. I was a predator observing its trapped prey. From the far side of the ballroom, Terrence emerged from a tight circle of older, wealthy men. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, laughing boisterously at a joke someone had just made. He was clearly in the middle of pitching his completely fraudulent cryptocurrency real estate fund to a fresh batch of unsuspecting victims. He turned around to grab another drink from a passing waiter and saw me standing alone by the floral archway. Terrence stiffened, his broad shoulders squared up defensively. He quickly excused himself from the group of potential investors, handing his drink off to a waiter. He buttoned his suit jacket and began marching across the crowded ballroom directly toward me. His stride was aggressive, designed to intimidate me into submission before I could even open my mouth. He thought he could bully me out of the room before I caused a scene. He was so blinded by his own toxic masculinity and massive ego that he completely failed to recognize the danger he was walking into. He looked at my suit, but his arrogant mind refused to process the quality. He looked at my watch, but probably assumed it was a cheap knockoff. He was entirely convinced that his fraudulent $500,000 bank loan made him the undisputed king of the world. I stood perfectly still watching him approach. I tightened my grip on the leather briefcase containing his legal and financial death warrants. My heart rate did not elevate. My palms did not sweat. I felt a profound sense of icy clarity. Well, 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 Terrence sneered as he closed the final distance between us, stopping just inches from my face. He leaned in, trying to use his height to tower over me. His breath smelled strongly of expensive bourbon and desperate arrogance. I see you actually had the nerve to show up here tonight, Clara. I would not ever miss this for anything, Terrence, I replied, my voice cool and perfectly even. You threw a lovely party with my stolen cash. Terrence's eyes flared with a sudden violent rage at the word stolen. The muscles in his jaw ticked furiously. He looked around, ensuring the nearby guests were sufficiently distracted by the blaring music and flowing champagne. He snatched a full glass of red wine from the silver tray of a passing waiter. He gripped the fragile stem so tightly I thought the crystal might shatter in his large hand. You think you are so smart, Clara, he hissed, stepping even closer. You think you can waltz into my domain and disrespect me. You are nothing but a bitter, lonely woman who cannot stand to see her family succeed. Maybe you need another little accident to remind you exactly where you belong. He raised the glass, tilting his wrist to throw the dark red liquid directly at my chest, fully intending to recreate the exact same public humiliation his teenage daughter had inflicted upon me just days ago. He wanted me to run out of the ballroom in tears. He wanted to break my spirit in front of the Chicago elite. But I was not the same passive woman who had sat silently at that steakhouse. Before the wine could even breach the rim of the glass, my left hand shot up. I locked my fingers around his wrist with an iron grip. Terrence froze, genuinely shocked by my physical resistance. His eyes widened as he tried to yank his arm away, but I held him firmly in place. I did not break eye contact. If a single drop of that wine touches this bespoke suit, Terrence, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal carrying pitch, I will not just take the house. I will call the Federal Bureau of Investigation before the valet can bring my car around. Terrence scoffed, trying to mask his sudden uncertainty with arrogant bluster. You are bluffing. You have absolutely nothing on me. I secured a $500,000 commercial bridge loan from a private equity firm yesterday. My capitalization is completely legitimate. I am untouchable. I released his wrist and smoothed the cuff of my jacket. I noticed a group of older, distinguished gentlemen approaching us. It was the exact group of wealthy potential investors Terrence had been pitching his fabricated business ventures to earlier. They were drawn by the escalating tension, holding their expensive Scotch glasses and watching us with keen interest. Is this your sister-in-law, Terrence? One of the older men asked. He was a prominent local real estate developer. Terrence had clearly been trying to reel him in all evening. Terrence instantly plastered a fake, overly bright smile across his face. He quickly lowered the wine glass and let out a forced chuckle. Yes, Richard, this is Clara. She is an accountant. We were just having a little family disagreement about financial strategies. You know how conservative tax accountants can be when it comes to disruptive innovation. He tried to laugh it off, projecting his fake alpha male confidence for his audience. He expected me to play along and keep the family secrets hidden, just like Beatrice and William always did. I turned to face the group of investors, offering them a polite professional nod. I am a senior forensic auditor, I clarified smoothly. I specialize in identifying corporate fraud, tracing hidden assets, and dismantling shell companies for high net worth clients. In fact, I was just discussing Terrence's latest venture with him. Terrence's fake smile became strained. His eyes darted nervously between me and the investors. Clara, this is neither the time nor the place for shop talk. We are here to celebrate Brittany. Oh, I think it is the perfect time, I countered, turning my attention fully to the wealthy men. Has Terrence pitched you his revolutionary decentralized cryptocurrency real estate platform yet? Has he mentioned the guaranteed massive returns within 30 days? Richard, the real estate developer, nodded slowly. He did mention a rather aggressive initial coin offering. It sounded highly ambitious. It is certainly ambitious, I agreed, my voice ringing clearly over the thumping bass of the ballroom music. It is especially ambitious, considering the holding company he plans to use has generated $0 in actual revenue over the past 36 months. Terrence lunged forward, trying to grab my elbow to physically steer me away from the group. Clara, shut your mouth right now. I sidestepped his grasp effortlessly. Do not touch me, I warned him. I turned back to the investors who were now staring at Terrence with hardened, highly suspicious expressions. Before any of you consider deploying your capital, you should probably ask to see his audited profit and loss statements. You will find 3 separate limited liability companies registered in Delaware, all completely empty. You will also find $400,000 in defaulted commercial loans from secondary lenders. That is a complete lie, Terrence shouted, his voice cracking with panic. She is a disgruntled family member. She has no idea what she is talking about. My corporate structuring is highly classified. I opened the brass latch of my leather briefcase. I reached inside and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a summary of his outstanding debts officially verified by my firm. I handed it directly to Richard. I highly recommend you run a basic background check on your prospective partners, gentlemen, I said calmly. You will also discover that the $500,000 private equity loan he secured yesterday was obtained using a forged quitclaim deed on a property he does not legally own. That specific transaction constitutes federal wire fraud. He is currently using those exact fraudulent funds to pay for the ice sculptures and champagne in this very room. The group of investors looked at the document, then looked at Terrence. The sheer disgust on their faces was absolute. Wealthy men do not tolerate being played for fools by desperate grifters. Stephanie, who had been watching from across the room, started power-walking toward us, her face pale with dread. Is this true, Terrence? Richard demanded, his voice turning to ice. Are you pitching us a seed round while actively defaulting on $400,000 of debt? Terrence was sweating profusely now. The moisture gleamed on his forehead under the bright chandelier lights. No, absolutely not. Gentlemen, please, she is having a psychological breakdown. She is trying to ruin my reputation because she is incredibly jealous of my success. Richard shoved the paper back into Terrence's chest. Terrence fumbled to catch it, spilling the glass of red wine he was holding all over his own expensive shoes. Do not ever contact my office again, Richard said with finality. The group of investors turned their backs on him and walked away in unison. They did not even finish their drinks. They headed straight for the exit, wanting nothing to do with a man carrying the radioactive stench of federal fraud. Terrence stood frozen in a puddle of spilled wine. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. His entire network, his reputation, and his desperate attempt to secure a lifeline had just been brutally dismantled in less than 3 minutes. The alpha male facade was completely gone, leaving only a terrified, broken man staring into the abyss. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with genuine horror. You ruined me, he whispered, his voice trembling uncontrollably. No, Terrence, I replied, snapping my briefcase shut. You ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the wreckage. Now, if you will excuse me, I believe my mother is waiting for the grand finale. Stephanie finally reached us, clicking aggressively against the polished floor. She grabbed Terrence by the arm, darting her eyes between his ruined shoes and the retreating wealthy investors. What did you say to them? Stephanie demanded, glaring at me with absolute fury. Did you poison our deal? I adjusted the grip on my leather briefcase. I did not have to poison anything, Stephanie. The well was already completely toxic. I simply handed them the water testing report. Terrence stood paralyzed. He could not even look his wife in the eye. He just stared at his ruined shoes, breathing heavily. Beatrice materialized beside Stephanie, her face pinched in an angry scowl. Clara. I told you to stand in the back. You are deliberately causing a public scene and driving away our guests. Before I could respond, a man in a black tuxedo approached our circle, flanked by two heavily built security guards wearing discreet earpieces. His silver name tag identified him as the general manager of the Waldorf Astoria. His professional customer service smile was entirely absent, replaced by a grim line. Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, the manager said, his voice clipped and incredibly serious. We have an immediate and critical administrative issue that requires your attention right this second. Beatrice puffed out her chest, instantly reverting to her arrogant socialite persona. Can this not wait? We are celebrating my granddaughter. We are hosting the most elite members of Chicago society tonight. The manager did not flinch. He did not bow to her fake authority. Actually, ma'am, it cannot wait, he replied smoothly. I need you to step into the hallway to discuss a catastrophic failure regarding your payment methods. Stephanie scoffed loudly. Payment methods. Terrence wired you a massive deposit yesterday morning. The entire event is fully funded. That is precisely the issue, the manager stated, his volume rising to cut through the chatter. The wire transfer from your husband's corporate account was flagged for federal review and completely reversed by the sending institution. Furthermore, the two certified checks you provided for the floral arrangements and ice sculptures officially bounced due to insufficient funds. Beatrice let out a sharp gasp. She pressed her hand against her pearl necklace, her eyes widening in absolute horror. What do you mean the checks bounced? We have millions in our accounts. Terrence, tell this man to run the routing numbers again. Terrence remained completely silent. The color had not returned to his face. He looked like a man standing on the gallows. The manager pulled a sleek payment terminal from his jacket. I have personally attempted to run the 4 platinum credit cards you left on file for the open bar and catering incidentals, he continued. Every single one returned a hard decline code. American Express informed our billing department that those accounts were permanently closed due to fraudulent activity. Stephanie grabbed her counterfeit bag and frantically dug through it. That is impossible. The bank made a mistake. Clara, this is your fault. You hacked our accounts. You need to call your office and release our funds right now. I simply stood there perfectly composed, watching the absolute destruction of their massive egos. I am not lifting a single finger, Stephanie, I replied. You invited me here to watch you shine. I am just enjoying the show. The manager held out the terminal toward Terrence. Your outstanding balance for the ballroom rental, celebrity entertainment, and premium catering exceeds $100,000. I need a valid form of payment immediately. If you cannot provide a working account right now, I am legally obligated to terminate this event, clear the ballroom, and contact the police for theft of services. Beatrice turned to Terrence, grabbing his lapels and shaking him. Terrence, give the man your corporate card. Call the private equity firm. Do something before my friends find out. I do not have the money. Beatrice, Terrence whispered, his voice cracking with utter defeat. The bridge loan was clawed back. The secondary accounts are frozen. Everything is gone. We have absolutely nothing. Stephanie let out a piercing, desperate wail. She looked around the lavishly decorated ballroom, suddenly realizing that every single white orchid, every drop of vintage champagne, and every flashing laser light was effectively stolen property. Her perfect illusion of wealth was evaporating in front of her eyes. The security guards accompanying the manager immediately took a step forward, their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts. Please shut down the music, the manager commanded into a small radio clipped to his lapel. We are terminating the event. The loud thumping bass that had been violently vibrating through the floorboards abruptly cut off. The sudden deafening silence in the massive ballroom was incredibly jarring. The celebrity music producer on the stage looked confused, taking off his headphones. The custom laser lights stopped flashing, and the main overhead crystal chandeliers flared to full blinding brightness. Hundreds of wealthy guests stopped talking and looked around in total bewilderment. Brittany, who had been posing for photos near the melting ice sculptures, dropped her arms. Her face twisted into a mask of pure panic as she realized the music had died and the bright lights were exposing her fake reality. She looked across the room and locked eyes with her mother, who was currently being flanked by hotel security. Ladies and gentlemen, the manager's voice boomed over the public address system. We apologize for the abrupt interruption, but this private event has been officially terminated by hotel management. We ask that you please locate the nearest exit and vacate the premises immediately in an orderly fashion. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of elite socialites. Whispers erupted instantly. Beatrice's country club friends began pointing and staring at our tense group, their eyes wide with malicious gossip. The ultimate social nightmare Beatrice had spent her entire adult life trying to avoid was unfolding live in front of her most judgmental peers. "You cannot do this to us!" Beatrice cried out, tears of profound embarrassment finally spilling down her perfectly powdered cheeks. "We are the Blackwood family. We are respected members of this community. You are trespassing," the manager corrected her coldly. I watched my family crumble into absolute despair. They were trapped, humiliated, and facing imminent arrest. The scaffolding had collapsed. I opened my leather briefcase one last time. I pulled out a small wireless microphone receiver I had brought specifically for this moment. I connected it to my smartphone and linked it directly to the hotel's broadcast frequency. It was finally time for the grand finale. I pressed the sync button on my phone screen. A sharp feedback ring echoed through the massive ballroom speakers, slicing directly through the panicked murmurs of the retreating elite. Every single guest froze in their tracks, turning their attention toward the towering digital displays that flanked the raised stage. I tapped another button on my secure application, completely hijacking the hotel video feed. The generic birthday graphics featuring Brittany's heavily filtered face instantly vanished from the walls. In their place, a crisp, high-definition legal document appeared on the massive screens. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I said, speaking directly into the wireless receiver. My voice boomed across the grand ballroom, commanding absolute authority. "Please do not leave the premises just yet. Since my family invited all of you here tonight to witness a spectacular display of real wealth, it would be a terrible shame to end the celebration without the main presentation." Stephanie spun around, her mouth hanging open in sheer horror as she stared up at the giant screens. Terrence looked like all the blood had been violently drained from his body. Beatrice tried to cover her face with her cashmere coat, desperate to hide from the burning stares of her high society peers. William just stared blankly at the floor, finally understanding the catastrophic magnitude of his own severe foolishness. "You see, my brother-in-law, Terrence loves to talk about synergistic pivots and corporate dominance." I continued, pacing slowly toward the center of the room. "He and my sister Stephanie have spent the last 5 years projecting the ultimate image of high society success. They mock anyone who does not wear designer labels. They look down on people who actually work for a living. But I am a forensic accountant. I deal in hard facts, verified data, and paper trails. I do not deal in expensive illusions. And the fact is, the party you are standing in right now is being funded by an aggressive, documented act of federal wire fraud." Loud gasps erupted collectively from the massive crowd. The country club socialites Beatrice had desperately tried to impress were now pointing at the screens, adjusting their glasses and reading the text illuminated in bright white light. They whispered to each other, absolutely scandalized by the revelation. I swiped my thumb across my screen, enlarging the document for everyone to easily read. Let us start with the family estate. For years, Beatrice and William have hosted you in their sprawling suburban mansion. They bragged about their real estate portfolio. What they conveniently forgot to mention was that they bankrupted themselves 5 years ago. Look closely at the deed currently on the screen. The legal owner is Vanguard Property Holdings. I am the sole proprietor of that firm. I bought their crushing debt to save them from immediate foreclosure, allowing them to live there as my tenants for $1 a month. Beatrice let out a loud, pathetic sob, collapsing against William's shoulder. Her wealthy friends were whispering furiously, their eyes full of judgmental disgust. The facade was cracking wide open. "But gratitude is not a trait my family possesses," I announced, stepping closer to Terrence. Yesterday, Terrence decided he needed a massive influx of cash to save his failing shell companies and throw this ridiculous party. He convinced my parents to illegally mortgage a house they do not even own. I swiped my screen again. A new document flashed onto the massive displays. This is a forged quitclaim deed. Terrence hired a corrupt attorney to fake my corporate authorization, attempting to steal the title of the house to secure a $500,000 commercial bridge loan. Terrence raised his hands, shaking violently. Clara, stop. Please turn the screens off. Do not do this in front of these people. I am begging you. We can fix this quietly. I will sign whatever you want. You did not beg when you insulted my career, I replied, my voice ringing cold and clear through the heavy speakers. You did not beg when you enabled your entitled daughter to throw wine on me. You just got greedy, and your massive greed made you incredibly blind. You thought you were securing a loan from a random private equity firm. You thought you had found a brilliant loophole. You had absolutely no idea that Apex Bridge Capital is a direct subsidiary of my wealth management company. The profound realization swept through the crowded ballroom like a shockwave. The wealthy investors Terrence had aggressively tried to court earlier in the evening were shaking their heads in utter disbelief. They realized they had almost handed their capital over to a desperate criminal. I personally approved your fraudulent loan, Terrence, I declared, locking my eyes directly with his. I let you take the money. I let you sign the personal guarantees. And the exact moment you signed that contract, you legally handed over every single asset you possessed to me. The luxury cars, the empty corporate accounts, everything. And because you explicitly violated the core terms of the loan by spending the commercial capital on ice sculptures and champagne instead of legitimate real estate investments, you are currently in catastrophic default. I swiped my smartphone screen one final time. A bold official eviction notice appeared alongside a formal default judgment. The harsh black text hovered over the silent crowd. As of this exact moment, the lease on the suburban estate is permanently revoked, I announced to the entire ballroom. William and Beatrice have exactly 48 hours to pack their belongings and vacate my property. Stephanie and Terrence are completely bankrupt. The credit cards have been permanently canceled. The cars have been completely repossessed. The illusion is entirely dead. The lavish lifestyle you all admire was funded entirely by the very same woman they openly mocked and called cheap. Brittany sank to her knees in her $12,000 gown, hiding her face. Thank you for attending this presentation. You may now please exit. The heavy, suffocating silence in the grand ballroom was suddenly shattered by the shrill approaching wail of police sirens. The sound echoed down the busy Chicago streets, growing louder by the second, until the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the massive frosted windows of the Waldorf Astoria. Terrence visibly flinched. The remaining high society guests quickly parted like the Red Sea, as four uniformed police officers accompanied by two plainclothes federal agents strode purposefully into the room. The lead agent held up a formal warrant, his face set in stone. He announced Terrence's full name over the scattered whispers, stating clearly that he was under immediate arrest for federal wire fraud, title forgery, and grand larceny. Terrence did not attempt to run. He did not try to deploy his usual arrogant corporate buzzwords to negotiate his way out of the situation. He was completely defeated, his fake empire reduced to ashes. His shoulders sagged as the officers turned him around and secured heavy metal handcuffs around his wrists. The sharp metallic click resonated through the cavernous space. Stephanie lunged forward, grabbing the federal agent's sleeve, screaming hysterically that there had to be a massive mistake. She yelled that they were wealthy investors, not criminals, but a uniformed officer gently yet firmly pushed her back, warning her not to interfere with a federal arrest. With Terrence hauled away in disgrace, the harsh reality finally broke through Beatrice and William's stubborn delusions. The illusion was gone and the panic set in. My parents rushed toward me, their faces drained of their usual haughty superiority. Beatrice fell to her knees beside Brittany, staining her couture dress on the floor. "Clara, please," Beatrice sobbed, grabbing the hem of my perfectly tailored trousers. "You cannot possibly do this to us. We are your blood. We are your family. Tell the police this was a massive misunderstanding." William stood over her, his hands clasped together in a pathetic, desperate plea. "Clara, we will do anything. Just drop the fraud charges against Terrence. Let us keep the family house. We have nowhere else to go." Stephanie joined the chorus of absolute misery, her expensive makeup ruined by a flood of terrified tears. She begged me to release the frozen trust funds just so she could hire a decent defense attorney for her husband. She promised she would never insult me again if I bailed them out of this nightmare. I looked down at the four people who had spent my entire life making me feel completely worthless. I searched my heart for any lingering shred of familial obligation. I felt absolutely nothing for them. The well was completely dry. "Blood does not intentionally throw wine on you and laugh while you stand there humiliated," I said, my voice echoing with icy, unshakable finality. "Family does not use you as a human bank account while treating you like trash on their shoe. Family does not steal from you to fund a fake, pathetic lifestyle. I am sorry, but I am just a cheap, low-level accountant. I simply do not have the high society class required to bail you out of a federal prison sentence." I gently pried my mother's trembling fingers off my trousers, stepping back to distance myself from their toxicity. I turned my back on their desperate wailing. I walked down the center aisle of the ballroom, my head held high, and stepped out into the crisp, cool night air. The heavy golden doors of the hotel closed behind me, shutting out their toxic noise forever. 6 months passed, bringing severe, undeniable consequences to those who had spent decades wronging me. Terrence quickly realized he had no legal defense against the mountain of forensic evidence I had provided to the authorities. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud to avoid trial and is currently serving 7 years in federal prison. Stripped of her stolen wealth and her husband's fake income, Stephanie was forced to face reality. She took a minimum wage job as a grocery store cashier to keep the lights on in her rented studio apartment. Brittany lost every single brand deal, and her entire social media following evaporated overnight. Her digital reputation was permanently destroyed. She now works double shifts at a local fast food restaurant, desperately trying to pay down the massive credit card debt left solely in her name. Former fans occasionally recognize her behind the cash register, serving as a brutal daily reminder of her spectacular fall. Beatrice and William were evicted from the estate after failing to meet the deadline. They now live in a cramped, dark apartment on the extreme outskirts of the city. Their country club friends immediately blacklisted them, completely erasing them from the high society circles they valued more than their own daughter. As for me, my life flourished in the absence of their heavy, suffocating negativity. I moved my corporate headquarters to an even higher floor in a prestigious downtown building, expanding my firm's reach. I enjoy my morning coffee in absolute peace, free from their endless demands and cruel insults. I look at my luxury watch and know that every single second of my time now belongs exclusively to me. Family is not defined by the people who happen to share your last name. True family is defined by the people who genuinely respect your boundaries and celebrate your true value. If someone constantly tries to push you down just so they can stand a little higher, let them build their arrogant tower out of paper. When the wind inevitably blows, you only need to smile and watch it collapse. Have you ever had to permanently cut ties with toxic relatives to protect your own peace and sanity? Please share your own unique story down in the comments below. Do not ever forget to hit the like button and subscribe to follow along for more journeys. Remember, you are never too cheap. They simply cannot ever afford your true worth. The story of Clara serves as a deeply profound testament to the idea that true self-worth is intrinsically self-defined and absolutely cannot be dictated by the toxic expectations of those around you. For over 3 decades, Clara silently endured relentless humiliation from a family completely obsessed with the fragile, superficial illusions of wealth, status, and social dominance. They dangerously mistook her quiet humility for sheer weakness and her silent endurance for permanent submission. However, Clara's ultimate triumph was not merely found in the spectacular financial dismantling of her abusers, but rather in her unwavering emotional independence. The most critical lesson here is that you never have to accept the diminishing, degrading roles that toxic individuals attempt to assign to you. Often, the very people who are supposed to protect and uplift us, our own blood relatives, can be the ones aggressively holding us back simply to serve their own fragile egos. Clara's journey vividly illustrates that walking away from highly conditional love is never an act of defeat. Instead, it is the ultimate courageous declaration of self-respect. She did not need their validation to successfully build her corporate empire, and she certainly did not need their permission to finally find her peace. When you finally stop contorting yourself to fit into the narrow, suffocating boxes designed by selfish people, you create the necessary space to build a life of genuine authenticity. Your true value is never determined by how loudly you can boast or how much designer fabric you can wear, but by the quiet, undeniable strength of your character. You owe absolutely nothing to those who only value you for what they can financially or emotionally extract from you. Reclaim your personal power today by setting unshakable boundaries and unapologetically walking away from anyone who refuses to see your true worth. Va.